Hey everyone, per your requests, I'm starting Sword of Coming, chapters 671 through 680 of the previous episode. Chun Ping'an assumes a middle-aged disguise and boards a private vessel to reach Pond Water City. On the ship, he easily overpowers a treacherous sea observation tier cultivator using his dual flying swords. Upon arrival, Chun Ping'an buys an antique painting and a black jade seal before gathering critical intelligence on the lawless state of Bamboo Scroll Lake, and the ruthless, bloody notoriety of Gu Can. Overwhelmed by the dark realities of his childhood friend's actions, Chun Ping'an sits dejectedly on the street steps like a lonesome hound. If possible, you can support me via PayPal, or become a channel member to help me keep this channel running. Thank you. Now let's get back to the story of Sword of Coming audio series. Chapter 681. The autumn wind rises, the crab roe is succulent. This was the best time to enjoy golden garb crabs in Pond Water City, and the entire city would be filled with the unique fragrance of the crabs whenever it was mealtime. In fact, some people would travel thousands of kilometers from the luminous Vermilion Empire to drink and enjoy crab at all kinds of waterside residences and restaurants where they had good relationships. Of course, few people from the Stonebrush Nation, which was located closest to Bamboo Scroll Lake, came to Pond Water City to enjoy the delicious crab this year. After all, even staying alive was a challenge right now. The meeting between Island Masters and Bamboo Scroll Lake was set to begin in about 10 or so days, and approximately 100 Island Masters would travel to Palace Willow Island, an island where the Island Master had been absent for many years. There they would vote for a new ruler of the lake. The river-severing True Lord, Lu Jimao, from Cyan Gorge Island was naturally expected to win the popular vote. However, this was Bamboo Scroll Lake, a place where more than 400 vagrant cultivators had joined forces to encircle and kill a nascent tier cultivator and a golden core tier cultivator immediately after leaving the harmonious banquet. Another piece of news spread throughout Pond Water City over the past 2 days, saying that Little Devil Gu was going to visit the city to enjoy some crab. Because of this, Pond Water City's young city lord Fan Yen had already started to spend huge sums of money to purchase the fattest and most succulent golden garb crabs available from Bamboo Scroll Lake. This was an extremely rare breed of golden garb crab called the bamboo branch. These crabs were extremely large, and they were filled with an abundant amount of water fortune essence. Ordinary fishermen didn't need to dream about catching a single one of these crabs in their lifetimes. In fact, they wouldn't even be able to catch a glimpse of one. Indeed, this breed of golden garb crab was a type of treasure that could only be caught by lucky abode tier cultivators. Cyan Gorge Island was at the peak of its power right now, and Lu Jimao finally stopped expanding his territory in force during the past year. Like a person voraciously wolfing down their food, he had finally become bloated and needed to rest for a while to digest what he had eaten. Otherwise, things might appear great on the surface, yet there would be instability and disunity among the members of the force. Lu Jimao remained very conscious of this issue, so he was very strict when screening the vagrant cultivator who came to join Cyan Gorge Island. Regarding the specifics, everything was handled by one of his disciples, a female cultivator called Tian Hujuan. She had initially been Gu Can's second senior sister, yet she had eventually become just senior sister. After all, their senior brother had already been killed by junior brother Gu Can, so they naturally couldn't leave the position vacant for too long. That would be unreasonable, and it would also be a bad look for their force. To put it simply, he was someone without a brain. He was close to 30 years old, yet he still liked to refer to Gu Can as Big Brother Gu. Because of these reasons, everyone in Pond Water City liked to view him as nothing more than a joke. Apart from him, there was also Cyan Gorge Island's fourth brother Qin Ju and sixth brother Chao Zhe, and they were both very outstanding cultivators in Bamboo Scroll Lake. Not only did they possess impressive talent, but they never showed any mercy when slaughtering their victims either. They were both capable generals who fought alongside the river-severing True Lord as they conquered new lands. There was also Lu Kaisang, the junior brother of Oriole Island's Island Master. He was several hundred years younger than his senior brother, but because he was the last disciple taken by the old ancestor before he entered seclusion, he enjoyed a surprisingly lofty status. Before Cyan Gorge Island had flourished and grown in power, Oriole Island had been one of the few large islands that could rival its power. Of course, things had now changed, and it was definitely no longer able to rival Cyan Gorge Island. There was also Yuan, the young island master of Drumbeat Island who had the nickname Roundy. His parents were immortal Dao partners, with both of them being at the Golden Core tier. His mother's surname was Yuan and his father's surname was Yuan, and it was actually his father who had married his mother's family, hence his surname was Yuan instead of Yuan. 2. Yuan's mother was a shrewish and unreasonable woman, so much so that she even caused headaches for Lu Jimao. Most importantly, it was said that this female cultivator had a very powerful background, having once been the adored mistress of a nascent tier sword cultivator in the luminous Vermilion Empire. In addition, there was also Prince Han Jingling of the Stonebrush Nation as well as Huang He, the son of a great general. All in all, there was Gu Kan, the profligate Fan Yen, Qinju, Chaozhe, Lu Kaisang, Yuan, Han Jingling, Huang He, and senior sister Tian Hujuan, the person who didn't like to show herself in public yet always needed to look to Gu Kan for directions. Apart from Tian Hujuan, who was forcefully dragged into the group by Gu Kan, the remaining 8 people were all like-minded individuals. Following Gu Kan's suggestion, they had caught a large rooster from some unknown place and smeared its blood on their lips to become brothers and form an alliance. They referred to themselves as the 10 heroes of Bamboo Scroll Lake. To say nothing of everyone else in Bamboo Scroll Lake, even the 8 other members of the group couldn't help but grumble in confusion. There were clearly 9 of them, so why did they refer to themselves as the 10 heroes? At the time, little devil Gu Kan had stood barefoot on the chair beside the main chair, hopping around as he pointed at the empty main chair, and saying with a grin that they would leave this position vacant for the moment. With a cute epsilon. Gu Kan was still very young, yet he had grown like a bamboo shoot in the spring rain after arriving at Bamboo Scroll Lake. His height had increased significantly over the past year, and he was as tall as young boys who were 14 or 15 years old even though he was only 10 years old. There were some rumors swirling around, saying that the flood dragon that liked to snack on cultivators was able to feed its energy back to little devil Gu, and thus temper his physique. Of all the assassination attempts that Gu Kan had faced, only one at Cyan Gorge Island had come very close to success. That time, the assassin had swung his saber and viciously struck little devil Gu in the back. If Gu Kan were an ordinary mortal, then he would have definitely been killed on the spot. Even if he were a chi refiner at the lower 5 tiers, he would have needed to recuperate in bed for at least 2 to 3 years. However, he had quickly reappeared on the island after just 2 short weeks. Sitting on the head of the flood dragon that he liked to call Little Catfish, he had continued to merrily wander around Bamboo Scroll Lake. Gazing out at Bamboo Scroll Lake from the tall buildings in Pond Water City today, one could see a gigantic Luchuan slowly sailing over. The Luchuan was the same height as the city wall of Pond Water City. The gigantic Luchuan sliced through the water, giving rise to small waves that created faint and imperceptible ripples on the lake, more than 300 meters away. A person who looked like a young boy was surprisingly dressed in dark green official garb, and sitting barefoot on the railing at the bow of the ship. He swung his legs back and forth, habitually sniffing from time to time as if there were still 2 trails of snot hanging from his nose even though so many years had passed and even though he had grown so much taller. It was as if he needed to drag the 2 green dragons back into their den. There were 3 people standing behind him, with one of them being senior sister Tian Hujuan, who now controlled the life and death of almost 10,000 people in Cyan Gorge Island and its vassal islands. She already possessed a sense of dignity and might similar to that of the river-severing true lord. Standing to her left and right were her 2 junior brothers, Qinju and Chaozhe. Standing behind them was a row of a dozen or so beautiful and shapely open-collar ladies, all with their own unique attractiveness. Since they were traveling outside, however, they were now wearing relatively conservative and refined dresses instead of leaving their collars extremely low and open. Meanwhile, in the water beneath the Luchuan, there was the small catfish that measured several hundred meters in length. Young City Lord Fan Yen of Pond Water City had already cleared out the dock and seized it for private use, shooing away all outsiders who weren't part of Gu Kan's group. Right now, young island master Yuan from Drumbeat Island, Lu Kaisang, whom a large group of old white-haired cultivators from Oriole Island referred to as Young Ancestor, and Prince Han Jingling of the Stonebrush Nation, who had already sought refuge here for half a year, were standing together on the dock and enjoying a hearty conversation with each other. Only Huang He, the son of a great general of the Stonebrush Nation, was absent due to factors out of his control. This was inevitable, as his father, who commanded 60,000 elite soldiers in the southeastern region of the Stonebrush Nation, was rumored to have betrayed the emperor not too long ago, surrendering to the heavy cavalry of the Great Li Empire. Not only that, but he even planned to support Prince Han Jingling and prop him up as the new emperor of the Stonebrush Nation. Thus, he was extremely busy at this moment, and Huang He wasn't spared either. In the end, he could only ask someone to deliver a secret letter to Pond Water City, telling brother Han Jingling to sit tight and wait for the good news. The silhouette of Pond Water City became increasingly clear. Tian Hujuan walked over to the railing and asked in a quiet voice, "Are we truly going to change our route when entering the city and purposely give those assassins an opportunity?" Chui Qin placed his hands behind his head and replied with a grin, "Or else, did you truly think that I came here just to eat some crabs? I've eaten so much of this crap that I'm almost about to vomit. Not only that, but it's also incredibly annoying to eat these crabs, and they're not even as delicious as the fried crabs from the small stream in my hometown. Those were deliciously crunchy, and I didn't even need to use chopsticks to eat them. That was the definition of deliciousness. You bumpkins from Bamboo Scroll Lake don't understand shit. You feel all smug and mighty simply because you have a few more stinky coins in your pockets. But look at me, do I need to bring any silver with me? Do I need to bring a large group of subordinates with me?" Tian Hujuan smiled and replied, "Junior brother is a dragon among mortals, so mortals like us naturally can't compare to you." Chui Qin leaned back and turned his head, chuckling, "Senior sister, you won't gain the right to become an open-collar lady even if you flatter me. You're too ugly and your chest is also too small. TSK, how pitiful. To ordinary-looking women like you, any mirror in the world is essentially a demon-exposing mirror." Tian Hujuan smiled awkwardly, not thinking that this was a bad thing at all. On a serene path beside the lake far away from the ferry station, there stood a middle-aged man next to a yellowing willow tree. He gazed at the Luchuan and Bamboo Scroll Lake from afar, and he grabbed the wine gourd from his waist, lifting it up and putting it down again and again. He couldn't bring himself to drink. As the local residents of the Dragon Spring Prefecture became increasingly familiar with the so-called immortals from the mountains, some people finally came to the realization that not all doctors in the world could concoct medicines that would allow one to sleep peacefully and without pain when one was suffering severe sickness. At the same time, the Dragon Spring Sword sect continued to recruit new disciples, even taking disciples from among the prisoners and refugees from the Lu Empire. 2 children ascended to the heavens in a single step, becoming little immortals in Divine Elegance Mountain. The Yang family's medicine shop started to become busy, with many middle-aged women bringing their children and young relatives to the medicine shop and doing everything they could to meet an immortal. Moreover, it was obviously Old Man Yang who was always sitting in the backyard who they suspected most of being an immortal. Due to the chaotic scenes, the Yang family's medicine shop was almost forced to close its doors. Every generation of the Yang clan would have a clan rule passed down by their ancestors, and the clan leader felt so ashamed at these scenes that he almost fell to his knees and kowtowed to Old Man Yang in apology. The visitors were all residents from nearby or familiar faces from the small town, and they were able to get closer to the Yang family's medicine shop through all kinds of networks and relationships. The Yang clan wasn't part of the small town's 4 families and 10 clans, and it was instead just a relatively well-off clan. Thus, it wouldn't be a good look if the medicine shop started to shoo patients and customers away. In any case, they wouldn't be able to shoo these persistent people away, unless they truly steeled their resolve and resorted to physical intervention. Left with no other option, the medicine shop eventually hired people to stand at the entrance, sincerely explaining to everyone that Old Man Yang wasn't an old immortal or whatnot. Rather, he was just an old man who knew a few secret prescriptions passed down by their ancestors. However, who would believe these unconvincing explanations? The more the medicine shop tried to explain, the more people grew suspicious that Old Man Yang was a powerful figure concealing his true identity. Fortunately, Old Man Yang didn't seem to care too much about these matters, and he didn't order the Yang clan to directly shut down their medicine shop. Instead, he told them to announce that he knew some physiognomy and bone appraising techniques, but he would need to charge the customers for each child that he tested for cultivation aptitude. Moreover, the price wasn't cheap, costing a whopping 1 snowflake coin per child. The residents of the small town had been poor for far too long, So even those who had suddenly become rich and wanted to give their descendants an opportunity to become an immortal in the mountains wouldn't waste away their money as if it were nothing. Some people sold many of their possessions, doing everything they could to save up 1,000 taels of silver. Meanwhile, some people borrowed money from their friends who had suddenly gained immense wealth after selling off their ancestral heirlooms. Of course, the large majority of people chose to sit back and observe the situation first. On the first day, not too many people visited the medicine shop to have their children examined for cultivation aptitude. Old Man Yang spoke a lot of profound and incomprehensible immortal terms, yet this wasn't important to the customers. What was important was the fact that Old Man Yang simply shook his head again and again, saying that not a single person possessed cultivation aptitude. When the number of customers started to dwindle, the medicine shop made another announcement that customers wouldn't need to pay a snowflake coin anymore. Instead, they only needed to buy some medicine from the medicine shop. They were all neighbors after all, so charging one snowflake coin was indeed a little unreasonable. This announcement caused the number of customers to drop off a cliff. The Yang family's medicine shop had gone mad thinking about money. Afterward, many previous customers started to regret their spending, going to the Yang family's medicine shop to ask for a refund of their one snowflake coin. They cried and rolled on the ground, pulling no stops in an attempt to get their money back. The medicine shop was extremely firm regarding this matter, refusing to take a backward step and refund its customers. To say nothing of one snowflake coin, it wasn't even willing to refund its customers a single copper coin. The transactions had been voluntary and mutual, so was there any reason for them to provide a refund? Did they truly think that the Yang family's medicine shop was a charity? Everyone was turned back. Yet news suddenly spread one day that a person who had a good relationship with the Yang family's medicine shop had become drunk and revealed that he had taken advantage of his relationship with the medicine shop to ask for his money back. Moreover, even the shop attendants admitted that Old Man Yang was actually a scammer, who was mechanically applying the principles that he had learned from an old and tattered fortune-telling book. In fact, everything that the medicine shop had announced before was on purpose and according to their plans. It was for no other reason than to make more money. The reputation of the Yang family's medicine shop was obliterated in a single night, and the descendants of the Yang clan were all like rats as they scampered along the streets. They grumbled in displeasure, and they asked their clan leader to fire that old man who dared to act mysteriously and scam customers, even though he was a talentless hack. They wanted to kick him out of the medicine shop. However, the clan leader went to great lengths to defend the old man and appease his restless clan members. Afterward, the medicine shop finally became peaceful and quiet. Even if Old Man Yang and the medicine shop begged people to come to have their fortunes told, it was very likely that not a single person would come. In fact, they would refuse to accept the offer even if it was free of charge. Of course, it would be a different story if they were paid to go. Business at the medicine shop was so poor that people didn't even care about the fact that two shop attendants had now changed. One was a kiln worker from Dragon Riding Alley, and one was a child from Peach Leaf Alley. When it came to these trivial matters, outsiders watched for fun, insiders watched to determine one's skills, while those who were fated would watch to observe the great Dao. A man who had disappeared from the small town for several years finally returned again. He was none other than gatekeeper Zheng Dafeng, and apart from becoming hunchbacked, he didn't return with a wife or any additional riches. Even though Zheng Dafeng wasn't an attendant in the medicine shop, he frequently sat on a stool at the entrance of the store, not getting in anyone's way and simply watching on for fun. He was still as carefree and unserious as always, with his lecherous eyes blatantly staring at the chests and bottoms of the passing ladies. This further damaged his reputation among the women in the small town. Apart from watching the trivial conflict after returning to the small town, Zheng Dafeng also saw the behavior of many people who had suddenly gained immense wealth overnight. Many of them gathered people together to gamble day and night, with some of them visiting the newly established brothels and striding in with heads raised and their chests puffed but walking out with their legs like jelly. There were some people with too much silver to count, and this caused their spines to become even stiffer than the old locust tree from back then. In the past, these men and old bachelors didn't even dare to breathe too loudly when they walked along Fortune Street and Peach Leaf Alley. Yet they were now brave enough to drink and discuss matters with the stewards in these areas. They asked whether or not it was possible to buy one or two decent-looking maidservants, ideally someone who was literate. It would be even better if they could read, and it would be best if they were young and beautiful. A few years ago, these men hadn't even dared to dream about lying in bed with a well-read woman, but right now they felt like it was necessary to do so if they wanted to have no regrets in life. In the past, having a pouch full of copper coins would make them a respected and revered individual, yet even silver coins were nothing more than an abundant resource now. Money? That wasn't an issue at all. Money flowed like water, quickly moving around and changing hands. The human heart also flowed like water. After entering autumn, Zheng Dafeng started to feel a little troubled. Basking in the warm autumn sun and glancing down at his crotch, Zheng Dafeng couldn't help but feel even more troubled. He always felt like he was letting down his little brother. Was he truly going to transform from a young and handsome bachelor into an old bachelor? He involuntarily recalled the woman who had stood outside the dust medicinal shop and said that her surname was Jiang. She most likely weighed 2 times as much as him, and the thought of this immediately caused Zheng Dafeng to shudder. She was a good-natured young woman, but there were some matters that couldn't be ignored simply by turning the lights off. Regardless of how good-natured and friendly such a big girl was, Zheng Dafeng couldn't mistreat himself even if he mistreated his little brother. Ruan Xiong had come with 2 pots of wine, and he raised a hand to offer one to Old Man Yao. "I'm not into drinking." Old Man Yang shook his head and replied with a smile. Ruan Xiong carried over a chair and sat opposite the main building, with the skywell in the roof separating him and Old Man Yang. It's rare for Sage Ruan to be feeling uneasy. "What's wrong? Are you worried about Ruan Xiong?" Old Man Yang asked. Ruan Xiong nodded in response. Old Man Yang made a rare joke, saying, "Is it truly that difficult to accept Chun Ping'an as your son-in-law?" Ruan Xiong took a swig of wine and replied, "Chun Ping'an isn't a bad person, and even though I'm unwilling to take him as a disciple, I don't have any issues with his character. If Ruan Xiao weren't Ruan Xiao, and if she were just an ordinary young woman, then I would have allowed her to do as she pleased. Perhaps I would have frequently enjoyed a drink with my son-in-law as well. This sounds quite nice and relaxing. Moreover, I wouldn't need to worry about my daughter being wronged either, and I would instead need to be worried about my daughter being too unreasonable and scaring away my son-in-law. Alas, my daughter is Xiao Xiao." Old Man Yang nodded and said, "Things can also be troublesome when they're going too well." "I understand." Ruan Xiong took another swig of wine to wash away his worries, wiping his mouth and saying glumly, "You mentioned these matters to me before, Divine Lord, so I was also able to roughly guess some of Cui Chan's plans this time. However, I don't know the specific details regarding the ill intentions of various parties, the immaculate links between the different events, and the meticulous scheme that ties everything together. This isn't my strength to begin with, so I can't be bothered even thinking about it. However, being hesitant and indecisive is a huge taboo when it comes to cultivation, and my Xiao will eventually suffer detrimental consequences if she strays further and further down this path. Thus, I instructed Xiao to go to Bamboo Scroll Lake. Since you're willing to invest, someone as smart as Cui Chan will definitely give you a reward. Rest assured, things will proceed smoothly and seamlessly. At the very least, the outcome won't be the opposite of what we desired," Old Man Yang said in reassurance. He paused for a moment before smiling faintly as if recalling something, and he continued, "To offer peaches and receive pears in return, and to sacrifice the peach tree for the pear tree. This is something to ruminate on. As for whether one tastes gold thread or sweet soup, that's entirely up to the individual themselves." 1. R&B. Ruan Xiong didn't waste his time contemplating these riddles. To say nothing of him, perhaps all of the lofty figures from the 3 teachings who had overlooked the jewel-small world couldn't guess this Divine Lord's true thoughts and desires. Of course, this was with the exception of Qi Jingchun. Ruan Xiong never wasted his time on pointless struggles, especially since he was already busy enough forging iron and making swords. If he had so much time, then he still needed to worry about Xiaoxiao's future. As such, he didn't have the time or effort to speak in riddles with other people. Old Man Yang had only made those remarks in an offhand manner anyway, so he quickly returned to the topic at hand and said, "You want to borrow clay vase Ali's Gu Ken to bring a clean break to this relationship. Then you want to borrow Embroidered Tiger's secret plan to drive a wedge between Ruan Xiao and Chan Ping'an. The more limpid their minds are, the more they'll like to act stubbornly and split hairs. and an imperfection that's as small as a sesame seed might become even larger than the heavens in their eyes. Because of this, I didn't stop Ruan Xiu from leaving the Dragon Spring Prefecture. It's also natural for you, a father, to feel. Ruan Xiong couldn't help but sigh with emotion and say, "This Cui Chan is genuinely very capable." Sage Ruan Xiong hoped that his daughter, Ruan Xiu, would no longer waste her time on romantic matters, and instead focus her attention on cultivation. At the very least, she should aim to advance to the upper 5 tiers as soon as possible so she could protect herself. It was as if someone were handing him a pillow just as he wanted to sleep. Ruan Xiong had never interacted with Cui Chan before, and Cui Chan hadn't given Ruan Xiong any secret signals either. Ruan Xiong had willingly entered a go board and become a piece for Cui Chan along with his daughter, Ruan Xiu. This was all as a result of Cui Chan's precise calculations and correct predictions. This was the strength of a masterful Go player. Old Man Yang smiled and explained, "Don't underestimate the former first disciple of the scholarly sage. Half of the rules pertaining to the battle between third and fourth that decided the scholarly direction of the entire majestic world were essentially established by Cui Chan. That being the case, how can he not be regarded as capable?" However, Cui Chan was already like an easily startled bird at the time, and he was also feeling a little guilty. He ran around to hide everywhere, and he didn't dare to show himself no matter what. It was a very difficult time for him, and his decision meant that he lost the final opportunity to make amends with his master. Of course, this can also be viewed as a form of intangible protection offered to Cui Chan by the scholarly sage. His first disciple had betrayed him and ended up like a stray dog who was faring even worse than the paramount sage during his earlier days. So were the disciples of the second sage truly going to act so shamelessly as to continually target him? Didn't the disciples of the second sage always preach about compassion? Since that was the case, then they should release Cui Chan like they were releasing a fart. Thanks to this, Cui Chan was able to escape to the eastern treasured vile continent without a hitch. Ruan Xiong, don't look at me with that kind of expression. The scholarly sage is indeed capable of doing such shameless things. In fact, it's because of this that I find him slightly likable compared to the rest of the sages accompanying the paramount sage in the Confucian temples. Ruan Xiong pursed his lips and commented, "The schemes of scholars probably have more twists and turns than all of the mountain ranges in the majestic world combined." Old Man Yang chuckled and concurred. This remains true even if we add the Taoist sect's heavenly world, the Buddhist sect's lotus flower world, and the demon tribe's savage world. For the first time, Ruan Xiong felt like drinking and chatting with the Divine Lord was much more pleasant than he had imagined. Perhaps he should visit more often in the future? His daughter would eventually marry someone and leave, but even if she stayed by his side, she most likely wouldn't care too much about him. Every time Ruan Xiong thought about this, he would feel a strong urge to open his own wine shop in the small town. That way, he wouldn't need to be teased by the woman at the wine shop every time he went to buy wine. Zheng Dafeng entered the backyard following Ruan Xiong's departure. As a disciple, the first thing that Zheng Dafeng had done after returning to the small town was to visit his master. It was during that visit that Zheng Dafeng had finally dared to look Old Man Yang in the eyes for the first time, calmly saying some extremely outrageous things. For example, even if he failed to achieve anything in his lifetime, he could still work at the relay stations to put food on the table. Otherwise, he could go to Chan Pingan's downtrodden mountain and continue to work as a gatekeeper. Moreover, Zheng Dafeng didn't feel was embarrassing at all. On the contrary, he felt like it would be quite good to live a relaxed and peaceful life. Old Man Yang had continued to puff at his smoking pipe, not saying anything in approval nor scolding his disciple. Zheng Dafeng had left the backyard of the medicine shop after speaking his mind, and he had felt more relaxed than ever before, even though he did indeed feel a little guilty. However, he had immediately found the entire situation quite laughable. He had been an 8th-tier martial artist back then, yet he had never dared to speak to his master like that. Every time they spoke with each other, his master would never say more than 10 words at a time. Zheng Dafeng had initially been afraid that his master would mistake his words as that of resignation, and thus look down on him even more. After mulling over it again and again, however, he felt like that would also be an okay outcome. He could stay in the small town and visit the old man in the medicine shop from time to time. He didn't need to care about whether the old man welcomed him or not. Zhang Dafeng entered the backyard of the medicine shop and sat down on a chair, not saying anything and simply planning to accompany his master for a while before leaving. Even though there were many things that he wanted to say, Zhang Dafeng was well aware of his master's temperament. Once Old Man Yang made a decision, not a single person in the world could change his mind, not him, not Li Er, and not anyone else. Old Man Yang took another puff from his smoking pipe, exhaling a smoke ring as he said slowly, "Didn't you bring a smoking pipe with you when you returned home? Why did you throw it away? Were you too embarrassed?" Zhang Dafeng was completely stunned, and it was as if he had been charred black and blue by a bolt of lightning from the heavens. He immediately counted on his fingers, exclaiming in delight, "Master, you spoke 22 words to me in a single breath. If a disciple doesn't even dare to look his master in the eyes, then is he worthy of any additional words from his master? Were you worthy back then?" Old Man Yang asked. Zhang Dafeng sat upright and replied, "This disciple has disappointed his master." Old Man Yang's reply was as harsh and vitriolic as always as he said, "With no expectations, how could I be disappointed?" This was the most typical kind of exchange that Zhang Dafeng had with his master before he left his hometown. Zhang Dafeng didn't feel aggrieved, and he instead felt quite happy at this moment. Adding these 8 words, his master had already spoken 30 words to him today. He definitely needed to brag about this when he saw Li Er in the future. Old Man Yang raised a hand and tossed over the smoking pipe that Zhang Dafeng had secretly thrown away outside the small town. Zhang Dafeng caught the smoking pipe, and he was surprised to discover that it was already filled with tobacco. "Let me ask you a single question. Is anyone else worthy of being schemed against by Cui Chan?" Old Man Yang asked. Zhang Dafeng sighed and rubbed his fingers together, lighting the tobacco in his smoking pipe. He was at least still capable of doing this. If Chun Pingin's bonded porcelain hadn't been shattered, then he would have initially been talented enough to become an earth immortal, Old Man Yang said. Not too good and not too bad, and definitely not outstanding. Now, however, things are a little different. Even if Chun Pingin's true nature is shattered and his path as a qi refiner is severed, he can still walk the path of martial arts. If worse comes to worst and he completely loses all hope, he can still be a despondent yet wealthy individual in downtrodden mountain. Is there anything bad about this? The master and disciple were both huffing at their smoking pipes, and Zhang Dafeng suddenly replied, "This isn't good." Old Man Yang chuckled in ridicule and responded, "Oh? Is that so?" Zhang Dafeng raised his head, summoning his courage and exclaiming, "He's Chun Pingin." Old Man Yang tapped his smoking pipe on the stairs and casually explained, the true reason why that being chose Chun Pingin was because of a remark made by Qi Jingchun. That being chose to take a gamble on the incredibly slim chance. Otherwise, do you genuinely believe that Chun Pingin was chosen because of his aptitude, talent, disposition, and circumstance? Zhang Dafeng didn't back down, retorting, "Then would Qi Jingchun have chosen Ma Kuxuan or Long Eyebrows from the Xie clan to persuade that being? If you ask me, I'd say that Qi Jingchun would be too embarrassed to even mention it. So, according to Chun Pingin's philosophy, we need to retrace the steps if we want to figure out the reasons behind an outcome." Qi Jingchuan's remark was naturally of critical importance, but can we truly ignore Chun Pingin's aptitude, talent, disposition, and circumstance? After leaving the small town and traveling around the world, I was made increasingly aware of the fact that those in the outside world take things one step further than the residents of the small town. They believe that as long as someone is rewarded for their pain and hard work, then their pain and hard work can no longer be considered as such. As it turns out, the grueling pain that people need to endure and the unpredictable nature of the human heart that they need to overcome are all inferior to a single cultivation tier, a single immortal treasure, a single flying sword, or a single fated opportunity. Old Man Yang chuckled as he listened, with his eyes ice cold as he replied, "Are these utter fools worthy of being discussed by us? They're nothing more than ants fighting for scraps of food, so how do you want to talk to them? Perhaps you want to get down on the ground to talk to them? By the looks of it, your trip through the outside world has made you even dumber." Zhang Dafeng chuckled sheepishly and hurriedly changed the topic, asking, "Master has placed a decent bet on Chun Pingin, so is Master not afraid of losing everything?" Old Man Yang shook his head and replied, "If my foresight is bad and causes me to lose my investment, then I have no one to blame but myself." Zhang Dafeng sighed in response. He had already done everything he could to help Chen Ping'an. If he said any more about Chen Ping'an, then he would most likely be making things worse instead of better. Old Man Yang glanced at the hunchbacked and slightly adrift Zheng Dafeng, revealing, Cui Chan's actions and desires as well as his secret philosophies have taught me some extremely valuable things. I've benefited immensely from them. I racked my brain for 9,000 years in the past, yet I was still unable to come up with a good answer for my dilemma. I thought about many things, yet I only made insignificant progress. In fact, I made more progress during 2 casual chats with Cui Chan. As such, I need to repay Cui Chan for this unexpected benefit. In other words, it won't matter much even if I lose everything pertaining to my bet on Chen Ping'an. Master, there's something that I'm very curious about. Out of all the disciples that you've taken, is there anyone that makes you very happy or very sad? For example, is Master relatively satisfied with senior brother Li Er having the potential to reach the divinity tier of the 10th tier? Zheng Dafeng asked. No, Old Man Yang replied with a shake of his head. Zheng Dafeng pointed at himself and asked with a sheepish grin. Then what about me? I'm already so pitiful, so does Master not feel a modicum of sadness for me? Old Man Yang replied with a snigger. There was a look of grief in Zheng Dafeng's eyes as he lamented. Master, even though I was already prepared for this, I still can't help but feel a little hurt after hearing your answer. Old Man Yang couldn't be bothered speaking nonsense with his disciple anymore, and he suddenly said, in order to stay alive, and to live a better life after staying alive, it's necessary to compete with the entire world. Children are naive, youths are hot-headed, ignorant people are courageous, those in the cultivation world are righteous, scholars are strong-willed, generals are loyal and ruthless leaders are risk-takers. All of these paths will allow one to stride forward with a clear conscience. However, some people insist on fighting with themselves, so how can they untie the complicated knot that they've made in their hearts? It's difficult for cultivators to cultivate their hearts nowadays, and this is because of a restriction that we established for cultivators back then. It's because of this restriction that cultivators are inferior to even ants. However, we didn't imagine at the time that it was coincidentally this handicap that became the so-called sparks that Cui Chan speaks of. However, everyone was caught by surprise that these ants actually managed to make it to the peak of the mountain. Of course, some people might have considered the possibility, yet they paid no heed to the matter because they only cared about their pursuit of immortality. They mistakenly thought that after the ants reached the mountain peak and saw the jade pagodas in the heavens, it would still be a very long journey for them to fly up from the mountains even if they grew wings. Thus, they could simply crush the ants to death at that time. They planned to fatten up the prey before hunting them and enjoying a scrumptious meal, yet in reality, things have remained very peaceful even after countless years. Many deities have managed to slow down the decay of their godly bodies, and heaven and earth are also continuing to expand further and further. However, you've already seen the final outcome. Old Man Yang didn't display too much grief, indignance or sorrow as he said this, and he remained so calm and composed that he appeared much like an outsider who was revealing the biggest secret of the world. Why aren't the sages of the 3 teachings disposing of Master once and for all to avoid any future troubles? Zheng Dafeng asked in a careful voice. Old Man Yang smiled and replied, Is there any point in you asking such a profound question right now? Should you not be thinking about how to escape the life of a bachelor? Zheng Dafeng smiled in embarrassment and remarked, So Master also knows how to tell jokes now. An extremely rare look of helplessness appeared on Old Man Yang's face, causing his wrinkles to bunch together as he replied, It's all thanks to the constant nagging by Li Er's wife who's detested by both gods and ghosts alike. Sister-in-law is also? Zheng Dafeng asked in a quiet voice. Old Man Yang sneered and replied, If she were, then would I not punish her until she lives a worse life than dogs and sows? It's because she's nothing more than an annoying mortal shrew that I don't bicker with her. Zheng Dafeng felt a huge sense of relief. Gu Can to Chen Ping'an is just like Chen Ping'an to Qi Jingchen. This is the crux of the death trap, Old Man Yang revealed. Zheng Dafeng frowned and asked, Gu Can and Chen Ping'an's innate dispositions are far too different, no? He shook his head and continued, It's not the same at all. If you ignore the notion of good and evil and look at them again, are they truly not the same? Old Man Yang asked with a smile. Zheng Dafeng fell deep into thought. However, His gaze gradually became resolute. Old Man Yang shook his head and warned, "Don't get involved in this matter. Even if you, Zhang Dafeng, were a 10th-tier cultivator, you would still be unable to make a difference. This situation has nothing to do with physical conflict or life and death, and the scholarly sage won't be able to help Chan Ping'an either even if he wants to. This has nothing to do with whether one possesses profound knowledge or a lofty cultivation base. Alpha Beta. Even though the scholarly sage's statues in the Confucian temples have been smashed, his knowledge still remains intact. As such, the scholarly sage can naturally use a profound principle to forcefully suppress Chan Ping'an's current philosophy and subdue the evil flood dragon in his mind's realm. In the long term, however, this will do more harm than good, and it will increase the risk of Chan Ping'an straying down the wrong path and walking to his death." Old Man Yang glanced at the sky and continued, "Branch Master Lu, who also visited me before, can indeed help Chan Ping'an walk onto a different path, but Chan Ping'an himself definitely won't agree to this option. Moreover, there's one thing that Chan Ping'an also assessed very correctly. That is, what Branch Master Lu yearns for is the Chan Ping'an who was chosen by Qi Jingchun, and not necessarily Chan Ping'an himself. Thus, once his mind wavers and he agrees to go to the White Jade capital, then the best-case scenario is that he becomes a puppet who can potentially reach the 11th or 12th tier. If he fares a little worse, however, then it's very likely that he'll never be able to escape from Branch Master Lu's palm no matter how many times he reincarnates. He'll be used as a tool to observe Tao." Zhang Dafeng nodded and concurred. This is just like a man feeling increasingly uncomfortable and attracted if he's unable to obtain his dream girl. She'll appear more and more beautiful because of this. Once he obtains her, however, he'll realize that she wasn't as special as he imagined. "There are many brothels in the small town now," Old Man Yang suddenly said out of the blue. Zhang Dafeng flushed bright red and he retorted, "Master, I might speak in a frivolous manner, but I'm not actually that type of person." Old Man Yang asked a seemingly unrelated question, saying, "There are 4 plaques hanging on the crab archway that belong to 3 teachings and 1 sect. Tell me, what's written on these plaques?" "The Confucian sects doing my part, the Taoist sects comply with the natural order, the Buddhist sects refrain from looking outward, and the militarian sects unmatched aura," Zhang Dafeng replied. Old Man Yang smiled and said, "Contemplate them carefully." Zhang Dafeng thought for a moment before saying, "The notion of doing one's part is one of the critical reasons why Chan Ping'an is trapped in his current situation." Old Man Yang smiled and explained, "The Taoist sect promotes pursuing the great Tao by oneself and integrating with the Tao of heaven and earth. Doesn't this sound wonderful? And that's why I said that Branch Master Lu's Tao power can save Chan Ping'an for the moment and perhaps for a lifetime. However, he doesn't even care about the mortal world anymore. So will he truly care about the life and death or the good and bad of a young bumpkin from Clay Vase Alley?" The scholarly sage scolded Branch Master Lu for only understanding the force of the heavens, but not understanding the power of the people. However, this isn't necessarily the case in my view. Perhaps it was true during the earlier days when Branch Master Lu was still seeking Tao in the lands of the majestic world, but things already started to change once he stepped onto the boat and went out to sea. He genuinely started to obtain what he yearned for, yet he also started to forget himself at the same time. He achieved extraordinary affinity, and he came close to the great Tao of the Tao ancestor. It was because of this that he became the Tao ancestor's favorite disciple. As for the Buddhist philosophies deriving from that Buddhist saying, it appears as though Chan Ping'an has another option to break free from his current dilemma. However, this is not the case. Cui Chan definitely considered this as well, so he already has countermeasures in place. As for the militarian sect's unmatched aura, then what about her? Zhang Dafeng lowered his voice and asked. Her? She doesn't care at all, Old Man Yang replied expressionlessly. In fact, she might be eager to see Chan Ping'an acting in a more straightforward manner. Everything will be fine as long as Chan Ping'an doesn't die, and she'll be happy even if he leans toward one extreme. Zhang Dafeng scratched his head and lamented. After saying so much, it sounds like Chan Ping'an is definitely done for? Old Man Yang smiled and replied. He'll become a wealthy person living in his mountains, and you'll become a gatekeeper responsible for looking after his land. You'll be able to eat and drink for free, so isn't that quite good? Zhang Dafeng suddenly looked up and stared at Old Man Yang, saying, Master purposely made the evil flood dragon in Chan Ping'an's heart rear its head. using this opportunity to temper his sword heart and dissuade him from adhering to the restrictive notions of benevolence, righteousness, and morality. You want Chun Ping'an to think that regardless of how vast heaven and earth are, only the sword in his hand is capable of speaking reason. That way, you can help that being remove the intangible sheath that Chun Ping'an is placing on the sword. Am I right? Old Man Yang smiled faintly and remarked, to be able to think this far, it looks like you have indeed improved a little. Is this a request from her? Zheng Dafeng asked in a quivering voice. Old Man Yang shook his head, a look of emotion and reminiscence on his face as he murmured, she doesn't care about these things and she wouldn't mind either way. After all, she's her. Pitiful, how utterly pitiful, Zheng Dafeng said with a sorrowful expression. He recalled the young man who had sat opposite him under the eaves in the dust medicinal shop, snacking on roasted seeds as he smiled and looked at everyone else in the courtyard. He felt like that young man had already suffered such a perilous and underserved calamity, so it should surely be time for him to relax and enjoy some peaceful days, right? Unexpectedly, however, there was a scheme even more terrifying than Du Mao, and his sword-devouring arc waiting for Chun Ping'an right from the moment he left Old Dragon City. It was now time for autumn hunting. Following the arrival of a chaotic age, there will eventually come a day when people in the majestic world dislike talking about principles and reasons, Old Man Yang said calmly. There are fools who think that learning and understanding the principles is useless. And there are ill-intentioned people who twist the principles to achieve their own goals and satisfy their own desires. Everything will come to light with the fundamental reasons. People will die without food, and it's even more certain that they'll die without water. At that time, people will realize the value of someone who is willing to speak reason. Fortunately, people have very short memories, often forgetting past hardships once their wounds heal. The world thus repeats this cycle again and again, with nothing improving at all even after 10,000 years. Fortunately? How is this fortunate? Zheng Dafeng asked in a shaky voice. Am I a human? Old Man Yang asked with a smile. Zheng Dafeng was rendered speechless. And are you a human? Old Man Yang asked next. Zheng Dafeng remained silent. In the end, Zheng Dafeng left the medicine shop and walked along Clay Vase Alley, walking past Chun Ping'an's ancestral residence and also walking past Gu Can's ancestral residence. Old Man Yang continued to puff at his smoking pipe alone in the backyard of the medicine shop. 10,000 years ago, there had been clusters of divine light in the sky, appearing majestic among the dazzling celestial bodies. The humans in the world were nothing more than insignificant sparks, so how could they possibly win? Cui Chan had already given his answer. Old Man Yang was unwilling to admit this, yet he had no option but to admit it. Meanwhile, the person who was able to give this answer was most likely already at some place in Bamboo Scroll Lake Dutati, the top level of a tall building in Pond Water City where the view was wide and the door was open. There sat a young man in white with a birthmark on his glabella. He was accompanied by an old man in Confucian robes, and both of them were gazing at the spectacular scenery of Bamboo Scroll Lake in front of them. They were none other than Cui Dongshan and Cui Chan. The two of them had once been a single person, Imperial Preceptor Embroidered Tiger of the Great Li Empire and the first disciple of the scholarly sage. Cui Dongshan's expression was solemn, as he controlled his flying sword with a golden tassel to create a small ring around them. This would serve as a warning to him that he shouldn't step outside this area no matter what happened. Cui Chan glanced at Cui Dongshan and said with a faint smile, as expected of a master and disciple, both of you like to imprison yourselves. Cui Dongshan gritted his teeth and spat. I'll definitely concede if I lose, so make sure you don't rely on your power to play dirty, and deny things if you lose. If it weren't for the old bastard forcefully setting up this situation and giving him no wiggle room to break free, would he have been willing to sit down at the table and make this bet? Right now, he sincerely detested the title of Big Brother. At the same time, he was also extremely unwilling to partake in gambles that offered big risks with big rewards. However, the old bastard didn't give him a choice, so what could Cui Dongshan do? On the other hand, Cui Dongshan felt like he would do the exact same thing as Cui Chan if their positions were switched. This was a very simple bet where Cui Dongshan and Cui Chan were going to determine who was primary and who was secondary. This was all, and their bet wouldn't pertain to life or death. It was also because of this that Cui Dongshan was unwilling to take things too far and go all out against Cui Chan. Of course, this was also what made Cui Dongshan hate himself the most. As a single entity, he was naturally well aware of where his bottom line lay. If Cui Chan lost, then he would allow Cui Dongshan to essentially become a powerful ruler in the Great Sui nation. Moreover, not only would Cui Chan place his bets on Chan Pinyin, but even the Great Li Empire's imperial Song clan would place their bets on Chan Pinyin. Chan Pinyin would be worthy of their bets. The previous time Cui Chan and Cui Dongshan had met, the former had smiled and said, "Even I think this game of Go is an insurmountable death trap for Chan Pinyin, so if he's able to overcome it, then he's naturally worthy of my admiration. If I'm unable to easily kill this kind of person, then I can only adopt the opposite extreme and do everything in my ability to win over him. There's nothing embarrassing about this." If Cui Dongshan lost, then he would have to leave the mountains and depart from Mountain Cliff Academy. He then had two options, one in which he would need to assist Cui Chan in formulating strategies to defeat and conquer the luminous Vermilion Empire, after which he would need to help strategize the deployment of the Great Li Empire's heavy cavalry following their detour around Lakeview Academy. Otherwise, he could assist in suppressing the various forces to the south of the Great Li Empire and to the north of Lakeview Academy, allowing the empire to rapidly digest the resources of the many nations that made up half of the eastern treasured Vile continent, turning these resources into fuel and power that truly belonged to the Great Li Empire. In addition, Cui Dongshan would need to obediently return to the philosophy of pragmatism and become the opening disciple of Cui Chan's school of pragmatism. Why was the immortal ship from the Azure Phoenix nation dilly-dallying and traveling so slowly? Why were there no immortal ships that traveled directly to Bamboo Scroll Lake from Old Dragon City, the Azure Phoenix nation, and the Yellow Court nation? Why had Chan Pinyin refined his second bonded item at the Great Sui nation's Confucian Academy? Why had people in the Dragon Spring Prefecture suddenly started to sell their mountains again? Everything was for the sake of making the necessary preparations at Bamboo Scroll Lake. Even the east wind was at their disposal. 1. However, everything pertaining to this process needed to be reasonable and follow the great trend of the continent. In other words, it wasn't the case that Cui Chan had forcefully set up this situation. Rather, Cui Chan's go pieces had all been played in a reasonable manner under the watchful gaze of Cui Dongshan. The Great Li Empire had secretly infiltrated Bamboo Scroll Lake a long time ago, and it was now time for them to silently haul in the net. As a critical territory that bordered the luminous Vermilion Empire, Imperial Preceptor Cui Chan viewed Bamboo Scroll Lake as a region that would definitely fall into the hands of the Great Li Empire one day. River-severing True Lord Lu Jimao wanted to unite Bamboo Scroll Lake. But who would he hand Bamboo Scroll Lake to after he succeeded? He would naturally sell it to an empire for an exorbitant price. However, this empire was quite far from Bamboo Scroll Lake, so they would naturally sell the lake off to someone else. And who would this someone else be? It would be the Parasol Leaf Continent's Jade Tablet sect. The Jade Tablet sect planned to choose a location with exceptional feng shui to establish a lower sect, and they had already come up with 3 potential locations. The first option was to split the Dragon Spring Prefecture into 2, with Ruanqiong and the Jade Tablet sect taking half each. The next option was to find a location close to the Cloud Forest Zhang clan and the Azure Phoenix nation, and the final option was Bamboo Scroll Lake. Lu Jimao had always been a fierce and wildly ambitious individual, and his swift actions, recruitment of allies, and show of benevolence and intimidation in the past few years had already painted him as a domineering ruler who was on the verge of conquering the entire Bamboo Scroll Lake. He would also receive assistance from cultivators of the Great Li Empire during the final and decisive battle, so it was entirely possible for him to achieve victory, and thus decide the fate of Bamboo Scroll Lake. Ruanxiu should have been considered as Gu Kan's opponent, and they should have waited until the new ruler of the lake was chosen, after which there would be a continuous cycle of killing as each victim took advantage of the former's weakened state. However, none of this mattered. Ruanxiu was never on the Go board to begin with, so whether she entered the Go board or not wouldn't affect the final outcome. She would at most allow them to put some icing on the cake. According to the plan, Chan Pinyin should have returned to the Dragon Spring Prefecture to happily purchase 1 or 2 mountains, following which he would practice fist techniques in the bamboo building in Downtrodden Mountain and casually chat with the little boy in azure and the little girl in pink. Everything should have been joyous and harmonious. After some time, however, Chan Pinyin would suddenly hear some nightmarish news from Bamboo Scroll Lake. with a chaotic battle being ignited between multiple parties. The young Guqin would be in the thick of things, and his actions would also have a relatively big impact on the outcomes of the battle. Only after a period of time would Qian Ping'an hurriedly board an immortal ship that was coincidentally sailing past Oxhorn Mountain, spending a huge amount of immortal coins and using his personal relationship with Wei Bo to embark on a risky journey over the eastern treasured Vile continent, eventually arriving at Bamboo Scroll Lake. At that time, however, the situation would have already become far more complicated and difficult to resolve than right now, because many people would have already died. Perhaps one of the victims would have been Ruan Xiu. Cui Chan smiled and said, "That won't matter because the conclusion is already foregone. Just pretend that I can't bear to grab a stick and beat you to death with a single strike, lest you take far too long to choose a new path of the Great Tao and delay the progression of the great trend sweeping through the eastern treasured Vile continent." Cui Chan shifted his gaze, looking at a small path beside the lake as he smiled and continued slowly. Qian Ping'an wants to remain upright and moral, and he's willing to adhere to principles and speak reason no matter the place and matter. Perhaps he truly wants to become a Buddhist self-cultivator. Then so be it. The principles that you believe in don't discriminate between relatives, friends, and strangers. That being the case, what will you do when those whom you're closest to and care about the most commit grave and unforgivable mistakes? Yet, those people seemingly have their own reasons as well. What will you do then, Qian Ping'an? Will the principles that you always adhere to still be useful at that time? I'm very curious and I'm very eager to find out. Or will you trawl through those nonsensical journals of literati and search through the so-called renowned warning quotes to look for the principles and reasons that you desire? Cui Chan narrowed his eyes and remarked, "Cui Dongshan, you and I can eagerly await the answer." Cui Dongshan smiled coldly and said, "A noble person can be deceived through means within reason. You're really pushing this idea to the limit." To Qian Ping'an, the examination in the small town back then actually posed many external enticements and thus wasn't pure enough. Cui Chan mused to himself. This was the cause of our brutal loss. At the end of the day, I underestimated the young boy from the impoverished alley. Since he was able to be chosen by Qi Jingchun, then we should have been more careful back then. And now, the current examination simply tests his inherent nature. In reality, Cui Dongshan wasn't kept in the dark about Cui Chan's plans, and he wasn't being targeted by the sinister plans of the old bastard. On the contrary, Cui Chan would directly explain each step of his plan to Cui Dongshan. The more this was the case, the more helpless Cui Dongshan felt. It was as if he could only sit still and wait for death. Thus, Cui Dongshan was finally unable to sit still when Qian Ping'an and the 4 martial artists from the picture scrolls arrived at the Azure Phoenix Nation. He couldn't do nothing and simply accept his fate of being reduced to that old bastard's vassal. This was the reason why he had suddenly appeared in that small and serene village. Afterward, Cui Dongshan had cheated slightly on 2 occasions during Qian Ping'an's journey to Mountain Cliff Academy. The first time, he had naturally borrowed the opportunity presented by the grand debate between Buddhism and Taoism in the Azure Phoenix Nation to talk about the philosophies of the legalist sect. When parting ways, Cui Dongshan had secretly handed a brocade pouch to Pei Qian, inside of which was a paper slip with a single sentence. The second time was their reunion at Mountain Cliff Academy, where Cui Dongshan had encouraged Qian Ping'an to read a dozen or so proper scriptures pertaining to the 3 teachings and 100 schools of thought. However, his true intention was to secretly recommend a few Buddhist scriptures to Qian Ping'an. Trying to overcome this situation was already nothing more than a wild dream. Taking 10,000 steps back, perhaps Master Qian Ping'an could at least protect and save his Tao heart. Cui Dongshan knew that he was putting up a futile struggle, and there were only 2 possibilities remaining in front of him. The first was legalism with its philosophies pertaining to right and wrong, the absolute rule of law, and the lack of discrimination between relatives, friends, and strangers. The second was Buddhism, with its philosophies pertaining to karma, universal suffering, cause and effect, and the carryover consequences of karma even through reincarnation. The misfortunes suffered by innocent people today were a consequence of the negative karma born from sins committed in a past life. This was only reasonable. In reality, Cui Dongshan had cheated one other time in an even more subtle fashion. It was in the courtyard at Mountain Cliff Academy, and it had also been the most clever out of the 3 times. Right now, Chui Chan was looking at the Luchuan that was slowly drifting across the lake and docking at the ferry station of Cyan Gorge Island. He smiled faintly and said, "You broke the rules 2 times and I can turn a blind eye to this. After all, you'll inevitably complain and be unwilling to yield if I use the great trend to suppress you. In any case, what difference will it make even if I show leniency 2 times?" Chui Dongshan smiled with squinted eyes and remarked, "How truly generous of you, old bastard. I like it. I like it very much. How about you show leniency 1 more time? The same mistake shouldn't be made more than 3 times, so I still have 1 opportunity left, right? What do you say?" Chui Chan gazed at the Luchuan and replied, "Haven't I already done that? I simply didn't mention it because I was afraid of embarrassing you too much." A troubled expression spread across Chui Dongshan's face. "While you were in the courtyard in Eastern Splendor Mountain, you purposely tempted the 2 lively and mischievous children to wantonly draw on your immortal picture scrolls, after which you purposely used a painting of a skeleton cooling down in summer to frighten Pei Qian." Chui Chan continued to muse. "You intentionally took things 1 step too far, inviting Chen Ping'an to beat and scold you as a result. You were definitely very pleased with Chen Ping'an's reaction, am I right? Because after traveling around the world for so long, he didn't rigidly adhere to the inflexible principles in the books. He understood that noble people should either yield or stand tall depending on the situation, with both being equally as important. He further understood the notion of adapting to local customs. You were smiling very widely, and you didn't care about those picture scrolls at all. In your eyes, those picture scrolls weren't even worth a single copper coin. Moreover, Chen Ping'an was willing to treat you as a close companion, and that's why he appeared so unreasonable at the time. It was clearly Pei Qian and Li Huai who were in the wrong, so why wasn't he willing to adhere to the fundamental principles of sequential order that he told you about? This is called adapting to local customs. All of the principles in the world need to appropriately conform to those human feelings that are so-called not wrong. Your intention was clear, and you wanted Chen Ping'an to have a long hard think after learning of Gu Kan's behavior and actions. How did Gu Kan transform into a little devil who wantonly kills innocent people after arriving at Bamboo Scroll Lake? Perhaps there are certain factors that make his actions forgivable? Perhaps this is the nature of the current world, so Gu Kan's wrongs aren't as severe as they appear. Chui Dongshan's expression was solemn. Chui Chan smiled and continued, "But were your actions truly effective? Do you truly believe that you made a very clever move? Your move might have been clever if Chen Ping'an were still the young boy from Clay Vase Alley. Yet to the Chen Ping'an who already has many principles acting as ballast stones in his mind, your move is simply adding fuel to the fire. You'll only cause him to think more and think deeper, eventually reaching a state where he's at a complete loss as to what he should do. Chui Dongshan, things have already come to this, so are you still unable to recognize the truly interesting nature of my moves?" Chui Chan appeared calm and relaxed, not turning around to glance at Chui Dongshan from the beginning to the end. He certainly wouldn't become aggressive or forceful either. "How are my moves interesting?" "They're interesting because of the balance that was maintained. The complicated nature of principles arises from the fact one can adapt to local customs, thereby rendering principles optional and dispensable. One can either adhere to principles or ignore them altogether. Between laws and principles, the laws of a land and the principles of a person, the two can be mixed and blurred. Bamboo Scroll Lake is a lawless area, with the laws of the mortal world being completely useless. The principles expounded by the sages are even more ineffective. In fact, even the rules established between the islands don't work. This is a place where big fish eat small fish and small fish eat small shrimp. Humans devour fellow humans, not treating each other as humans as they do so. Everyone relies on their fists to speak, and almost everyone is guilty of violence and slaughter. Swept along by the environment of Bamboo Scroll Lake, no one can stand removed from this phenomenon and become an exception. These are all legitimate excuses that Chen Ping'an can use to take a step back and search for peace of mind. I purposely left all of this wiggle room for Chen Ping'an, presenting him with countless possibilities and choices. The Great Tao and the Fork Roads all lie in front of him, and there's no one standing in his way. In this way, I can teach him to experience the world for himself. As it turns out, there are seemingly no principles that are genuinely innate and justified. Through his relationship with Gu Kan, I want Chun Ping'an to be left with no option but to disapprove of his current mindset. I want him to accept the shameful but widespread mortal view of there being no notion of right and wrong, with standpoints being the only thing that matters. Cui Chan smiled faintly and said, when a good person who adheres to principles comes across a person who believes more in strength and only discusses principles in a perfunctory manner, the former will be left bloodied and bruised due to the restrictions that they've placed on themselves. They would have essentially imprisoned themselves. Let me see Chun Ping'an. Let me see how you can still discuss hope and disappointment in the future. Cui Dongshan smiled in a pitiful manner and remarked, how ingenious, how unspeakably ingenious. Cui Chan continued to explain the situation. With each sentence he spoke being like an additional blade driven into Cui Dongshan's heart. Gu Kan's mother invited Chun Ping'an inside and offered him food back then, so Chun Ping'an feels like she saved his life. Chun Ping'an views Gu Kan as family, and the relationship between them is no inferior to the relationship between Chun Ping'an and Lu Xianying. Indeed, Chun Ping'an views Gu Kan as a blood brother. In fact, even that small catfish was personally given to Gu Kan by Chun Ping'an. Cui Dongshan, you sneakily encouraged Chun Ping'an to read Buddhist scriptures, attempting to use Buddhist philosophies to save him. However, can he truly be saved? Doesn't Chun Ping'an believe the words on that plaque? Refrain from looking outward. The karma of those innocent people who were killed can be explained, but once a person practices Chan, attempting to create a peaceful Buddhist realm beyond the principles of Confucianism, a new problem arises. Regarding the earliest karma that's related to Chun Ping'an, can he still remember it? And can he still see it? If Chun Ping'an pretends that he can't see it, then nothing else will matter too much, since he would have essentially lost his pure heart already, the matter that Qi Jingchun cherished the most. Victory and defeat between us will also be decided. If Chun Ping'an genuinely can't see it, however, then that doesn't matter either. I'll find someone to remind him. In the end, Cui Chan concluded by saying in a calm voice, no one can save him this time, and Chun Ping'an will find it even more difficult to save himself. He didn't appear overly delighted. Cui Dongshan remained silent as he sat there and listened. Cui Chan finally turned around to look at Cui Dongshan, smiling and asking, young men should be filled with energy and spirit, so why do you appear even duller and more lifeless than me? Cui Dongshan closed his eyes, with tears streaming down his face as he murmured softly, here's wishing that master's mind enjoys eternal spring, eternal spring. The Luchuan had already docked, and the middle-aged man with the surname Chan was still standing under the yellowing willow tree in the distance. He ultimately didn't drink, and he was filled with hesitation after he retied the wine gourd to his waist. He was 17 years old this year. Cui Chan stood up, extending a hand and saying with a slight smile, please enter the trap. The Luchuan slowly docked, and it was so majestic in size that Fan Yen, Yuan Yuan, Lu Kaisang, and the others who were standing at the dock could only crane their necks to look up at it. Over at the bow of the ship, Gu Kan hopped down from the railing and senior sister Tian Hujuan naturally walked over to help him gently pat his dark green official garb. Gu Kan shot a glance at her and said, you don't need to disembark today. Tian Hujuan's face was filled with worry as she said, apparently the assassins who are hiding in Pond Water City are sword cultivators from the luminous Vermilion Empire. So we definitely can't underestimate them. With me present. Gu Kan smiled and interjected, you won't be of any use at all. Or perhaps senior sister is willing to die for me if I truly come across any life-threatening danger. Since you definitely won't, don't try to ingratiate yourself with me regarding these matters. Do you think I'm stupid? Take, for example, your action of flattening the creases in my official garb right now. You're acting willingly and within your abilities, and I also enjoy it a lot. How good is that? There was a hint of despondence in Tian Hujuan's eyes as she relented to Gu Kan. Qin Ju and Chao Zhu exchanged a smile. They definitely couldn't treat junior brother Gu Kan as a little child. Their master, river-severing true lord Lu Jimao, had once joked at a celebratory banquet that only Gu Kan was most able to obtain his true inheritance. Afterward, Lu Jimao had looked around the banquet hall with an eerie expression, and directly announced that only Gu Kan could become the future island master of Cyan Gorge Island. No one else was allowed to compete with him. Otherwise, there would be no need for Gu Kan to do anything, and he would directly clear out the challengers himself. Moreover, he definitely wouldn't waste the challenger's corpse. In the end, the only people who disembarked the Luchuan were Gu Kan, his senior brothers Qin Ju and Chao Zhe, as well as two open-collar ladies wearing veiled hats to conceal their appearances. The open-collar ladies were lithe and alluring. Young City Lord Fan Yen of Pond Water City appeared impressive on the surface yet was actually useless in reality. He was tall and sturdy, and he also appeared very good-looking. He quickly walked over to welcome Gu Kan and the others, cupping his fists as he bowed and said with an obsequious smile, "Big brother Gu, didn't you complain about the crabs being too annoying to eat last time? Your little brother has put some thought into it this time, and I've especially chosen for big brother." A playful smile appeared on Fan Yan's face as he drew two large semispheres in front of his chest and continued, "A young lady like so. However, let me say this first. If big brother Gu doesn't take a fancy to her, then we'll simply have her extract the crab meat for us. If big brother Gu does take a fancy to her and takes her back to Cyan Gorge Island as a maidservant, however, then remember to count this as a merit for me. You might not know, big brother Gu, but it took a lot of work to bring her over from the Stonebrush Nation to Pond Water City. I spent a huge sum of immortal coins." Gu Kan smiled with squinted eyes and said, "It can't be that this young lady who has an opportunity to get closer to me has already been swapped out for someone else, right? Perhaps she's a mortal enemy of mine who's carefully plotting to assassinate me." Fan Yen was stunned and he murmured, "Then what should I do? Have I wasted all of my immortal coins?" There was a gloating smile on Yuan's face. Before Gu Kan had arrived at Cyan Gorge Island, Lu Kaisang had been the previous little devil wreaking havoc throughout Bamboo Scroll Lake. Lu Kaisang genuinely looked down on the foolish Fan Yen, but he was naturally happy to be acquainted with an idiot who was willing to spend exorbitant amounts of immortal coins. In fact, Fan Yen was someone who would become extremely angry if he wasn't allowed to throw his money away. All of the island masters in Bamboo Scroll Lake needed a moneybag who was happier to spend money than to earn money, and this was not to mention that Pond Water City was the third largest city in Bamboo Scroll Lake. It was genuinely overflowing with money. Lu Kaisang was a slender and delicate young man dressed in snow-white robes. Huang He had once joked that if the beautiful young man put on a small amount of makeup, he would definitely qualify to become one of Gu Kan's open-collar ladies. Of course, he would need to carry two large buns in front of his chest first. Lu Kaisang had flown into a fit of rage and immediately lashed out, directly killing a martial arts grandmaster who had stepped forward to protect Huang He with his life. However, Gu Kan had eventually persuaded him to back down. Even so, it was abundantly clear that the relationship between Lu Kaisang and Huang He, the only child of the Stonebrush Nation's great general, had been completely ruined. Huang He felt immense regret after the fact, and he had tried all kinds of ways to repair the relationship between them. However, Lu Kaisang didn't give him a chance. Lu Kaisang said to Gu Kan in a soft and delicate voice, "Rest assured, Can, I've already assessed the situation, and our opponent is only a cultivator at the lower 5 tiers. She's fairly good-looking, and very well renowned in the Stonebrush Nation. Compared to her, the ladies that you're collecting in the big courtyard on Cyan Gorge Island are nothing more than unrefined women who dirty our eyes." Gu Kan raised a leg and lightly kicked Lu Kaisang, jokingly scolding, "Are you bloody stupid? Why did you tell me beforehand? Now I won't be pleasantly surprised anymore." Lu Kaisang rolled his eyes at Gu Kan, and there was surprisingly a hint of seductiveness in his expression. Qin Ju and Chao Zhe found this incredibly weird. Yet they didn't dare to let their feelings show on their faces. Even though they were all members of the 10 heroes of Bamboo Scroll Lake, everyone needed to be well aware of who was truly powerful and influential among the 9 current members. For example, Huang He had misjudged things one time, mistakenly thinking that Lu Kaisang was a good brother of his whom he could unconditionally trust and joke around with. However, he had immediately been met with a sharp rebuff. It was said that he had initially been complaining about the unfair treatment upon returning to the great general's residence, yet he had ended up being severely reprimanded by his father. Yuan, the young island master of Oriole Island whom his parents had nicknamed Roundy, looked around and asked with a perplexed expression, "Gu Kan, where is your large catfish? It isn't going to disembark with us? We walked through the streets of Pond Water City last year already, so we know that they're wide enough for your large catfish to travel through." Gu Kan placed his hands inside the opposite sleeves of his official garb, smiling with squinted eyes as he replied, The small catfish will stay in the lake this time and won't go to Pond Water City to have fun with us. It needs to swim around and drink a bit more water right now, especially since it ate far too many chi refiners last year. It directly absorbed the water fortune essence of 2 large islands that had been accumulating for several hundred years without thought as well, so it's often been cultivating in seclusion at the bottom of the lake for the past year. Let me tell you guys some good news. I'm only sharing this secret with you guys because we're all brothers, so remember not to tell anyone else. The small catfish will soon become a legitimate nascent tier cultivator. At that time, even my master, the river-severing true lord, wouldn't be a match for my small catfish. Perhaps only the old man who's already disappeared from Palace Willow Island for many years might have the right to fight with my small catfish. Big Brother Goo, you promised me that you would allow me to stroke the big catfish's head if you became Happy Day. That way I can go around and brag to everyone else. Does this promise still count? Fan Yin asked with a dazed expression. Gookin raised his head slightly, looking up at the dimwit and thinking that there were genuine idiots in the world who weren't simply concealing their strength and biding their time. They were genuinely stupid, and this was completely unrelated to whether they were rich or poor, or whether their parents were intelligent or not. Gookin smiled faintly and replied, "Why will it not count? Since when have I ever gone back on my words?" Fan Yin smiled widely and danced for joy. However, Gookin immediately kicked him in the crotch and remarked, "Your little brother down there is so small. You've grown up all these years for nothing." Fan Yin keeled over and grabbed his crotch in pain, not becoming angry as he begged, "Please don't be Big Brother Goo. My parents are lenient regarding everything except for the matter of carrying on the family line. I definitely can't mess around with this. You taught me a new concept last time, saying that gallant heroes and cultivators who don't pursue loneliness in old age will be too ashamed to greet other people and travel around the cultivation world. I repeated this to my mother, yet she was incensed and chased me around to beat me for a long while. She didn't hit me hard and it didn't hurt at all, but I started to feel a little guilty when I saw the rims of her eyes becoming red." Gookin stood on his tippy toes and patted Fan Yan's head, saying, "It's said that fortune favors the foolish, so you can definitely have a bunch of idiotic children with your future wife who's yet to be born." Fan Yan grinned in delight. Gookin rolled his eyes. This idiot couldn't differentiate between praise and insult, nor could he differentiate between good people and bad people. Everyone could tell that the foolish Fan Yan would definitely be tricked and taken advantage of by other people if he truly left the protection and supervision of his parents. However, Gookin was extremely lenient to Fan Yan, not going overboard even though he did trick the idiot of some money. Moreover, he didn't allow other people to bully Fan Yan too much either. There was a bright glimmer in Lu Caisong's eyes, and he appeared even more delighted than Gookin as he exclaimed, "This is brilliant news. Can, you and I can drink a few more cups of Crow wine at the banquet afterward." Yuan had a round and chubby face, and he was the most simple-minded out of the few so-called brothers. He was always smiling, and he never became angry regardless of how other people teased him. However, Yuan was completely stunned when he heard the shocking and significant news about the small catfish, with his expression freezing for a very brief moment before returning to normal. He clicked his tongue in wonder and remarked, "Thanks to our relationship with Gookin, won't the few of us need to walk with a swagger and throw around our weight when we travel around Bamboo Scroll Lake in the future? Only that will suit our status." Gookin smiled and said to Fan Yan, "You, Kaisang, and Roundy can bring my 2 senior brothers to the restaurant where we're eating crabs first. I need to take a slight detour to buy a few things first." Fan Yan became extremely angry, and he surprisingly glared at Gookin and huffed, "Buy a few things? Buy. Big Brother Goo, are you looking down on me, your brother, from the bottom of your heart? If Big Brother Goo likes something in Pond Water City, is there any need to spend money to buy it?" Gookin jumped up and slapped Fan Yan across the face, scolding, "Who the fuck said that I need to spend money to buy things? After all, just how bad does it sound to say that I'm stealing things?" Even though Fan Yan was slapped, there was a dazzling smile on his face as he clutched his cheek and raised a thumb, praising, "Big Brother Goo is indeed a refined person." Gookin waved a hand and said dismissively, "Piss off, don't delay me from enjoying the scenery here. How can I have fun with you guys around?" Lu Caisong's expression was stern as he interjected, "No, Bamboo Scroll Lake is far too chaotic now, so I need to accompany you for safety." Fine, 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 you can follow behind my ass and eat dust. You're nagging me like a bloody woman, Gukin said in helplessness. Lu Kaisang humped coldly in response. They parted ways at the dock, and Fan Yan had naturally prepared an extravagant horse-drawn carriage for his big brother Gu already. Gu Kan and Lu Kaisang walked toward one carriage, while the two open-collar ladies walked toward another carriage. In the eyes of the vagrant cultivators in Bamboo Scroll Lake who came from all walks of life, there was only a single point of similarity between Gu Kan and Lu Kaisang. That was, they both had a very good master. Gu Kan's hands were still inside his opposite sleeves as he suddenly elbowed Lu Kaisang, who was walking beside him, grinning slyly and saying in a low voice, "If you go to my hometown, and if you somehow lose your current cultivation base, then I dare say that you'll definitely excite those perverts and single men who are coincidentally passing by when you walk through the small alleys. They'll chase after you and grope you, and you'll sob and run to my house to furiously knock on the door shouting, 'Not good, Gu Kan, not good. Some men are trying to strip me naked. Haha. Just thinking about this makes me incredibly happy.' However, do you know what's even funnier? It's the fact that those bastards will curse and let loose a torrent of abuse after they pull your pants down and find a fucking dick. And do you know what's the funniest thing? It's the fact that they'll grit their teeth and steal their hearts and flip you over anyway. They'll punish you on the spot. Oh wee ha ha, I can't anymore, my tummy hurts." Gu Kan bent over and roared with laughter as he walked. "How disgusting." Lu Kaisang spat with an ice-cold expression. The two of them stepped inside the carriage and sat down, and only then did Lu Kaisang ask in a quiet voice, "Why did you suddenly change into these clothes? Didn't you dislike these kinds of fancy clothes before?" Gu Kan closed his eyes and didn't respond. Lu Kaisang hesitated for a moment before explaining. Yuan is a very shrewd and calculating person, and his mother also has a close and personal relationship with some nascent tear-sword cultivator from the luminous Vermilion Empire. Many people in Bamboo Scroll Lake think that this is a rumor that Oriole Island purposely spread to frighten everyone, but my master told me that this is 100% true. In the past, Yuan's mother was indeed the favorite mistress of that powerful sword cultivator. Even though he was unable to give her a legitimate title and status, the good relationship between them definitely still exists. You definitely have to be careful, because once you kill Yuan who harbors ulterior motives, it essentially means that you'll become the target of a nascent tear-sword cultivator. Gu Kan didn't open his eyes, and the corners of his lips curled up as he replied, "Don't think of Yuan as such a bad person. I'm saying this for your sake." Lu Kaisang exclaimed in anger. "You'll suffer the consequences if you ignore these facts. Yuan's family is filled with sinister people who like to silently backstab others." Gu Kan finally opened his eyes and asked, "Regardless of how sinister Yuan is, can he compare to me, Gu Kan?" Lu Kaisang immediately covered his mouth and smiled. Gu Kan copied Lu Caisang's tone, saying in a sweet and seductive voice, "How disgusting." Lu Kaisang suddenly became a little melancholy, looking at Gu Kan, who was transforming significantly with each passing year. He was just a young child, but did anyone dare to regard him as such? Even his master, one of few cultivators who could somewhat rival the river-severing True Lord, had said that Gu Kan was a true freak, unless he suddenly died one day and genuinely proved the nonsensical statement, "To commit many crimes is to seek certain death." One day, he would definitely grow up to become an entity that even upper 5-tier immortals wouldn't dare to provoke once he took full advantage of the great trend that had little to do with Cyan Gorge Island. "Gu Kan, when will you open up to me?" Lu Kaisang asked in a soft voice. Gu Kan took one hand out of the large sleeves of the official garb, pulling back the curtains of the carriage and replying indifferently, "Lu Kaisang, you don't even need to think about this. There are only two people in the world who I'll open up to, and this won't change for the rest of my life. I know this is unfair to you, especially since you're one of the few cultivators in Bamboo Scroll Lake who genuinely views me as a friend. However, there's nothing I can do about this. I was already gaining renown when you met me, so I can't ever open up to you." They had already arrived inside the city, and Gu Kan let go of the curtains and continued with a smile. "However, rest assured that I'll definitely exact revenge for you if someone beats you to death one day." Lu Kaisang pursed his lips. He then leaned against the wall of the carriage and asked, "Gu Kan, how have you achieved all this at such a young age?" "Back in my hometown, I started watching my mom argue and fight with other people when I was around 3 or 4 years old. That, and I'm a very quick learner, Gukin replied. He then raised a finger and continued. When I was slightly older, I could lie on the ridge and remain unmoving for at least 2 hours even as the scorching sun blazed down on me, all for the sake of catching a catfish. Even he couldn't compare to me in this regard. Who is the he that you speak of? Lu Kaisang asked in curiosity. Gukin narrowed his eyes and retorted. Do you want to die? Lu Kaisang wasn't afraid of anyone or anything in Bamboo Scroll Lake. Yet he surprisingly felt a slight sense of apprehension at this moment. Gukin's expression suddenly changed again, and he chuckled in amusement as he remarked, that evil little Yuan. There'll eventually come a day when I ask him with a slight twist, does your mom want to die? What's so impressive about having a nascent tear sword cultivator as his father? If Yuan provokes me, then I'll strip his mother naked in front of the nascent tear sword cultivator, and hang her from the bow of a luchuan as I travel to every single island in Bamboo Scroll Lake. There was a look of puzzlement on Lu Caisang's face. Gukin once again pulled the curtains back, explaining absent-mindedly, that was the dialect from my hometown, so you obviously can't understand. Inside the top floor of the tall building in Pond Water City, Cui Dongshan was still sitting within a barrier of golden lightning. He heaved a soft sigh. Cui Chan leaned down slightly as he looked at the 2 picture scrolls on the floor, saying with a faint smile, are you very disappointed that even the final wisp of hope in your heart has been crushed? You shouldn't have this kind of mindset where you place all of your hopes in someone else. Cui Chan most likely knew that Cui Dongshan wouldn't respond, so he continued to muse. These 2 critical death traps are tied together. The principles that Chan Ping'an has slowly learned, and the sinister nature that Gukin has naturally developed. You might think that the critical factor lies with Gukin, mistakenly believing that this young child will suddenly come to his senses once Chan Ping'an uses emotion and reason to touch his heart. Ignoring the fact that these principles and reasons are difficult to expound, Gukin won't change his innate nature even if his relationship with Chan Ping'an is extremely close. This is just how Gukin is. Clay Vase Alley is only so big. So how could I have not noticed Gukin's extraordinarily heavy bone chi? In fact, even Lu Jimao failed to lift the little boy up. Cui Dongshan, are you underestimating yourself, Cui Chan, a little too much? And because of this, you dared to come up with your plots without understanding Gukin's true nature? People like us can only make a maximum of 1 mistake and no more than that, especially not in the same way again. However, I can't blame you for this, as people always like to grab onto that tiny wisp of hope when they reach a dead end. This is simply human nature. In reality, we already knew this about Gukin when we were still one person. I saw it, so you naturally saw it as well. You've simply become flustered and confused right now. Cui Chan pointed at the picture scroll where Chan Ping'an was secretly tailing the horse-drawn carriages and asked, do you know where you made an even bigger mistake? Cui Chan answered his own question saying, when Qi Jingchun comprehensively turned against us in that old residence in the small town back then, he said that he would cause our cultivation base to fall again and again if we dared to target Chan Ping'an again in the next 60 years. Qi Jingchun naturally wasn't making an empty threat, and both you and I are keenly aware of this fact. After we became 2 people, however, the remnant youth in you was rebellious and unwilling to believe this fact, right? As a result, you stood at the bottom of the well at that inn and were almost killed by a wisp of Chan Ping'an's sword chi as he stood at the mouth of the well. Afterward, you chose to take another extreme, starting to believe Qi Jingchuan's threat without a sliver of a doubt. This is the last wisp of hope in your flustered and chaotic mind's lake, isn't it, Cui Dongshan? Cui Chan remained calm and composed as he gazed at the picture scrolls, and he said to himself, Qi Jingchun is like a ghost that continues to haunt us, but he's truly as dead as can be already. That being the case, why don't we logically consider this problem again? Let's assume that Qi Jingchuan's ghost skills are divine, with his foresight so incredible that he was already able to foresee this calamity at Bamboo Scroll Lake. Thus, Qi Jingchun separated out a wisp of his soul before his death, and placed it at someplace in Bamboo Scroll Lake. However, have you ever considered this before? Just what kind of scholar is Qi Jingchun? He had extremely high hopes for Zhao Yao. Yet he was willing to have Zhao Yao peacefully continue on his journey of seeking knowledge through the world, even if it meant that Zhao Yao would no longer be able to inherit his scholarly lineage. Following this logic, How do you think the incomplete soul of Qi Jingchen will respond to the current situation? Will he be hiding in some corner and watching Chen Ping'an, simply hoping that Chen Ping'an can live on and enjoy a peaceful and carefree life? Perhaps he sincerely hopes that Chen Ping'an won't need to carry so many troublesome burdens on his shoulders in the future? Even you're feeling sorry and distressed for your new master. So do you think Qi Jingchen feels the same way? Cui Chan chuckled and continued. Of course, I don't deny the fact that I would have remained apprehensive even if Qi Jingchen had genuinely split his soul into 3 parts back then. Now, however, if he dares to show himself and reveal any clues to me, then I won't give him the opportunity to open his mouth to speak. I won't give him the chance to say even a single word. Cui Dongshan turned around and dazedly stared at Cui Chan, the older and more mature version of himself. Say, why do I have to end up like the current you? He asked. Cui Chan smiled faintly, shifting his finger to the carriage and replying. What you said just now. Chen Ping'an will most likely say something similar to Gu Qin when he comes face to face with him. Why did you become the type of person that you hated most back then? Cui Chan didn't so much as glance at Cui Dongshan and the slightly quivering golden lightning field as he continued slowly. Disregarding the fact that you're completely unable to kill me, this death trap will still remain a death trap even if you somehow manage to kill me. This is unchangeable, just like the great trend of the world. So, why don't you sit here obediently and make the most of this opportunity while I still have some time and haven't returned to the Great Li Empire yet? Cui Dongshan, you can always ask me for explanations regarding the many matters that you don't understand. When Cui Chan stopped speaking, the room fell completely silent. As if recalling something amusing, Cui Chan smiled and said, Since you're not asking any questions, then let me ask you a question instead. How do you think Chen Ping'an will feel if Gu Qin responds to his question? Gu Qin might appear confident and justified as he replies, I don't feel like I'm wrong. If you're so capable, then why don't you beat me to death, Chen Ping'an? Or perhaps he'll reply, Chen Ping'an, where were you when Mom and I were being bullied by those bad people at Bamboo Scroll Lake? Cui Dongshan's vision was blurry as he dazedly stared at the old man in Confucian robes, the other part of him that had unwaveringly walked to his current position and status. Cui Chan smiled faintly and said, In reality, everyone will feel loneliness of varying degrees once they grow older, regardless of whether they read books or not. Some smarter people might vaguely sense that heaven and earth and the entire world are not silent and motionless at some sudden instant in time. Some who reflect on their conscience will receive a hazy answer filled with guilt and remorse. Do you know what this is called? You don't, because I only discovered the answer in the past few years. Cui Dongshan, you're trying to move against the current, yet you're getting pushed back again and again. If I don't say it, then you won't ever understand it. This is called a person's conscience of heaven and earth. However, this kind of feeling definitely won't allow a person to enjoy a better life. Instead, it will only make one feel increasingly troubled and uncomfortable. This is the case regardless of whether the person is good or bad. Cui Chan paused for a brief moment before continuing. Oh, that's right, while you were whiling away your time at the Great Sui Nation's Mountain Cliff Academy, I told the old Divine Lord about the ideas that we came up with back then, helping him untie a small knot in his heart. Think about it, someone like the old Divine Lord needs to spend almost 10,000 years to overcome a single obstacle in his mind, so how long do you think it will take Chen Ping'an? Moreover, if it were me instead of you, I definitely wouldn't have sobbed uncontrollably simply because of Chen Ping'an's unintentional reply of think about it again. A completely different reply from what the old scholar said back then. Yes, just like how you're sobbing right now. Cui Dongshan raised an arm and covered his eyes. You don't even have the ability to scold me and call me an old bastard anymore. Cui Chan chuckled. By the looks of it, you're truly heartbroken and almost as pitiable as Chen Ping'an. However, there's no rush, and your master will only become more pitiable and heartbroken than you in a moment. Cui Dongshan leaned back and fell onto the floor, with his tears and snot mixing together as he sobbed. Cui Chan was expressionless as he said, If I remember correctly, the first time that we suffered such a pitiable mindset was a very long time ago, when we were still on the top floor of the scripture library in our hometown, the one where Grandpa removed the stairs. We were around the same age as your host body's current age, and we were so angry that we challenged Grandpa by purposely tearing a page from the sagely scripture that he admired the most, using it to wipe our bum after we took a shit. When Grandpa saw the soiled page that we threw down the scripture library, He didn't fly into a fit of rage, nor did he angrily scold us. In fact, he didn't say anything at all. Instead, he simply put the stairs back before leaving. Cui Chan smiled and continued. In reality, I only told the old divine lord half of the relevant matters. That is, the weak and fragile human nature possesses hidden strength, what future generations have described as so-called empathy, synesthesia, and compassion. These hidden strengths can encourage people to perform actions that are unimaginable and foolish in the eyes of those paramount and apathetic deities who possess flawless mindsets. This is the case no matter how powerful or talented an individual person is. For example, people will righteously sacrifice themselves for the sake of others, feel happiness, anger, joy, or grief because of the emotions of others, choose brutal deaths for the sake of someone they only just met, emit blinding radiance because of a small flame in their hearts, sing loudly and vigorously as they march toward death, and willingly allow others to use their corpses to ascend even further. They'll help future generations take another step up the mountain, eventually reaching the mountain peak and the jade pagodas where they can dismantle everything. They can annihilate the deities that peer down on the world and treat the fortune of the human race as incense, fortune, and food. Cui Chan smiled again, explaining, however, this is only half the story. The other half of human nature is a person who is innately unscrupulous and will stop at nothing for the sake of survival. No matter how lowly and insignificant this person is, they'll view themselves as a unique and important being. Thus, countless such individuals yearn to live on, to live longer, and to live better. We're oblivious to the fact that we already know about the critical principles. Influenced by the nature instilled in us by the deities when they were raising and training us, we compete and fight for the critical principle. Since only one such principle exists, we can only snatch it from other people to nurture and grow our own. This kind of pursuit is endless and eternal. Cui Chan pointed at Chan Ping'an in the carriage, saying, Gu Kan might not know about Chan Ping'an's struggles and difficulties, just like how Chan Ping'an might not have known about Qi Jingquan's thoughts back then. The old man in Confucian robes retracted his finger and asked with a smile, so why don't you guess something? When Qi Jingquan held an umbrella for Chan Ping'an as they walked along the street outside the Yang family's medicine shop for the very last time, Qi Jingquan already offered the reasons for Chan Ping'an to not feel guilty in the future. However, I feel like there's one matter that's worth considering. Back then, had the young boy from Clay Vase Alley already guessed that he was the critical go piece used to trigger Qi Jingquan's death? Cui Chan turned around, smiling as he shook his head. Cui Dongshan had already blocked off all of his senses. Cui Chan continued to observe the two painting scrolls, musing to himself, Old scholar, what would you say if you saw these matters? You would tug your beard and remark, not good at all. Cui Chan suddenly smiled in ridicule and exclaimed, casting one's gaze over the extremely large parasol leaf continent, there's surprisingly only Sun Yuan who isn't blind. How truly inconceivable. Cui Dongshan was lying ramrod straight on the floor like a dead person. Cui Chan turned back around and wondered out loud. Which sentence did you write on that piece of paper in the brocade pouch? This is the only thing that I'm curious about. Don't play dead. Even if you've sealed your bridge of immortality, I know that you can still guess my thoughts. I know that you're at least this smart, Cui Dongshan. Cui Dongshan remained unmoving, insisting on playing dead until the very end. On the busiest street in Pond Water City overflowing with people, a place that was the least likely choice for an assassination, there broke out an intense and heart-stopping assassination attempt. There was an 8th-tier sword cultivator from the luminous Vermilion Empire, an 8th-tier martial artist, and a golden core tier formation cultivator who had already set up his formations. This was a flawless setup. However, the outcome greatly disappointed the spectators. Firstly, the assassination attempt was far too sudden, and secondly, the conclusion arrived far too quickly. The second horse-drawn carriage exploded apart, revealing an open-collar lady who was wearing a veiled hat. She allowed the bonded flying sword of the 8th-tier sword cultivator to pierce through her heart, as she killed the lunging wing formation tier martial artist with a single punch. She dug the martial artist's heart out, gripping it tightly in her hand and swallowing it with a single gulp as she leaped away. She then caught up to the sword cultivator, striking him in the back with a punch and brutally cracking his militarian golden crow armor. She then pierced his chest with her fingers and once again dug out a heart, hovering in midair and not looking at the corpse that was plummeting to the ground. She allowed the nascent soul of the sword cultivator to flee into the distance with its golden core. This was something that she had discussed with her master before. There would be no more fun to be had if she killed all of them in a single go. In fact, this so-called open collar lady was none other than Gukan's small catfish. It had secretly advanced to the nascent tier already. The combat power of a nascent tier flood dragon was equivalent to that of a 9th tier martial artist, plus a nascent tier cultivator. However, the small catfish wasn't an ordinary flood dragon, and it was instead one of the few remaining descendants of 5 true dragons. It walked over to the first carriage, still carefully chewing on the 8th tier sword cultivator's heart as it did so. This was a fine delicacy, a scrumptious meal that was incredibly difficult to come across in Bamboo Scroll Lake. Gukan was still wearing his dark green official garb as he jumped down from the horse-drawn carriage, and Lu Kaisang followed closely behind him. Gukan arrived in front of the small catfish and reached over to wipe the corners of its mouth clean, complaining, "Small catfish, how many times do I need to tell you? You're not allowed to eat in such a crude manner. Do you still want to sit at the dining table and eat with Mom and me in the future?" The small catfish smiled bashfully and turned its head to the side in embarrassment. A cold chill ran down Lu Caisang's spine. Gukan swaggered over to the golden core tier formation cultivator, who was standing at the side of the street and not daring to move a single muscle. The people in the surroundings had already receded like a falling tide. The formation cultivator wasn't frozen to the spot in fright because of a weak will. Rather, the gaze of that wretched beast had already locked onto her, meaning certain death if she dared to move. Gukan placed his hands inside his opposite sleeves, walking in a circle around the golden core tier formation cultivator, who looked like an ordinary woman. In the end, he stood in front of her and lamented, "Ah, it's a shame that your appearance is so shabby, Auntie. Otherwise, I could have spared your life." The woman immediately fell to her knees with a thud, begging, "Gukan, please spare my life. I'm willing to serve you in the future." Gukan smiled and remained silent, seemingly weighing up the pros and cons. The small catfish was no longer wearing its veiled hat, yet it was still dressed in the uniform given to open-collar ladies when they traveled outside. It burped in satisfaction, after which it hurriedly covered its mouth. Gukan turned around and shot a glare at the small catfish. He then turned to Lu Kaisang and asked with a smile, "How was it? You didn't follow behind my ass and eat dust for nothing, did you?" There was a dazzling smile on Lu Caisang's face as he nodded in response. If he wasn't, then he wouldn't have been the biggest young devil in Bamboo Scroll Lake before Gukan's rise to the top. Gukan twisted his neck and chuckled. "Lu Kaisang, why don't you repeat to this auntie the rules that I announced to the entire Bamboo Scroll Lake in the past?" Cyan Gorge Island had been plagued by many surprise attacks and assassination attempts in the past, yet Gukan had surprisingly told the enraged river-severing True Lord Lu Jimao to not follow the clues and pursue the masterminds hiding behind the scenes for whatever reason. However, their enemies and the vagrant cultivators who had hired assassins purely due to their dislike of Gukan's wanton troublemaking weren't brainless fools. They eventually stopped risking their lives or wasting money, and they no longer sent people on a one-way trip to Cyan Gorge Island. Lu Kaisang shot a sideways glance at the woman, saying with a faint smile, "Regarding all provocations and assassination attempts outside Cyan Gorge Island, the first esteemed guest to make an attempt will be punished by death. The second person to make an attempt will be executed along with a close relative, making them a couple in death. The third person to make an attempt will be executed along with their entire family. If they don't have family, then the family of the mastermind will be executed. If even the mastermind is a pitiful person with no family, then the closest friends and so on will be executed. To put it simply, we can't have the culprits suffer a lonely journey to the underworld." Gukan nodded and turned around to once again look at the woman who had an expression of fear and despair. He pulled one hand out from his sleeve, raising 3 fingers and saying, "Why charge toward a futile death? Revenge is a dish best served cold, and even 100 years won't be too long to wait. However, you people are indeed right in the sense that who would dare to challenge me in 100 years' time? The 3 of you are far too incompetent. I remember an assassin at Cyan Gorge Island 2 years ago who was truly quite impressive. He wasn't especially strong, yet his method was very effective, unexpectedly hiding in the toilet and unleashing a sword strike at me. He was truly a fucking genius. If it weren't for the small catfish's mouth being too quick, I was actually reluctant to punish him with death. Gukin kept his other hand inside his sleeve, and the 3 fingers on his hand were still raised as he continued. Before your assassination attempt, I've already faced 3 attempts on my life outside of Cyan Gorge Island. Like I said to the person before you, he needed to have a nice little reunion with his entire family. They needed to reunite regardless of where they were living. The first culprit was punished by death, the second culprit was punished by death along with the death of a close relative, and the third culprit was punished by death along with the death of their entire family. This is the 4th time now, so what should the punishment be again? The small catfish gulped and replied, execution of the entire clan. Gukin feigned realization and remarked, yes, that's right, that's indeed what it was. He then retracted his fingers and placed his hand back inside his sleeve, bending down slightly at the same time. This was the good thing about speaking with women. They were often shorter than him, so he wouldn't need to crane his neck and look up as he spoke. This saved a lot of effort. Gukin chuckled softly and said, your entire clan is going to be executed. However, there's actually nothing to be scared of, as this is nothing more than a big reunion. During normal times, you people won't be able to have a full reunion, even when it's New Year or some other important festival. At this moment, a middle-aged man carrying a sword on his back and a wine gourd by his waist suddenly walked out from under the eaves of some building not far away from here. He directly walked toward Guk, and Lu Kaisang turned around, narrowing his eyes as killing intent radiated from his body. Gukin also turned around, smiling and saying, don't worry, let him walk over. Lu Kaisang hesitated briefly before ultimately yielding and stepping aside. The middle-aged man with the surname Chun walked in front of the young boy dressed in dark green official garb. The small catfish that had already assumed human form suddenly took a backward step. Gukin had a mental link with the small catfish, and he had only just furrowed his brows when that person slapped him across the face. Say that again, the person said. Lu Caisong's jaw dropped when he saw this. Almost everyone in the street had the same reaction. The person immediately raised his palm again, viciously slapping Gukin once more as he raised his quivering yet stern voice and shouted, Gukin! Say that again. Gukin turned his head and spat a mouthful of blood on the ground. He then cocked his head to the side, with a look of delight in his eyes even though his face was red and swollen. Haha! Chun Ping'an, you've finally come. The dark green official garb was none other than a garment refined from the skin that the small catfish had shed after advancing to the nascent tier. The river-severing true lord has spent a hefty sum of money to ask a skilled master to secretly refine the shed skin into a Dao robe. Gukin took his hands out of his sleeves, and he no longer appeared like the little devil that countless vagrant cultivators in Bamboo Scroll Lake viewed as lofty and enigmatic. He spread his arms and gave a little hop on the spot, exclaiming, You're so tall now, Chun Ping'an. I was thinking that I could be as tall as you when we met each other again. The middle-aged man remained silent the entire time. The onlookers standing on the busy street in Pond Water City and watching the situation unfold barely dared to breathe too loudly at this moment. Even Lu Kaisang, who was equally as unruly as Gukin, felt a mysterious sense of pressure and unease. Gukin scratched his head. Is Auntie still doing well? Chun Ping'an finally asked in a hoarse voice. Yes, she's doing well. Gukin replied with a vigorous nod. I want to visit Auntie, can I? Chun Ping'an asked. Of course you can. Mom always mentions you. Anyway, why are you acting like we're outsiders, Chun Ping'an? Gukin replied in an aggrieved voice. Gukin chuckled and replied, Why should I pay any extra attention to them? They can wait for later. Come on, let's go, I'll bring you over to Cyan Gorge Island straight away. Mom and I have a big place to live in now, and we're much better off than we were in Clay Vase Alley. To say nothing of horse-drawn carriages, even my small catfish can enter and exit freely. Just think about it, how wide does the path have to be? It sounds like a very mighty and impressive residence, right? You're not going to notify Fan Yen, Yuan, and the others first? Chun Ping'an asked. Gukin shook his head and replied, There's no need. This bunch of friends is only to eat, drink, and muck around with. They're not important at all. Chun Ping'an didn't say anything else, and he simply shot a glance at the young woman standing behind Gukin, the small catfish that he had caught in the fields in the small town many years ago. It was now traveling around the world in human form, taking on the appearance of an ordinary young woman. Looking at her carefully, however, one could see her vertical golden pupils, a feature that would reveal some clues to cultivators who were astute. When Qian Pingyan glanced at her, the small catfish didn't take another backward step like it had just then. However, the descendant of one of the 5 true dragons in the Jewel Small World, who didn't even take Bamboo Scroll Lake's Lu Zhimao seriously, kept its eyes lowered as if it didn't dare to catch Qian Pingyan's gaze. Qian Pingyan didn't say anything as he turned around to leave, making his way to the dock. Gu Kan briskly followed after him, and he took a glance at Qian Pingyan's back and thought for a moment before eventually telling Lu Kaisang to notify Fan Yen and the others. He then instructed the small catfish to bring the Golden Courtier assassin along with them. Lu Kaisang wanted to say something, yet he couldn't help but hesitate. There was an ice-cold look in Gu Kan's eyes, so Lu Kaisang humped coldly before taking his leave. Only then did Gu Kan swagger over and catch up to Qian Pingyan. He was extremely happy, and the large sleeves of his official garb billowed with energy. If it weren't for Qian Pingyan's arrival, then the woman at the Golden Courtier would have been executed today. Not only that, but her entire clan would have been executed as well. Gu Kan wasn't joking around, and he would have definitely allowed her entire clan to have a big reunion in the underworld. Gu Kan saw that Qian Pingyan had already walked past the horse-drawn carriage without any sign of stopping, so he shouted, "Qian Pingyan, you're not going to take the carriage?" Qian Pingyan didn't stop or turn around as he replied, "I have my own feet, and I can keep up with the carriage in any case." Hearing this, Gu Kan told his small catfish to bring the assassin with her and take the carriage, while he continued forward to walk beside Qian Pingyan. They walked together to the Luchuan owned by Cyan Gorge Island. As they walked, Gu Kan didn't ask Qian Pingyan why he had slapped him twice, nor did he brag about his might and impressive deeds in Bamboo Scroll Lake. Instead, he simply chatted about the interesting matters that he had heard about the Dragon Spring Prefecture. However, Gu Kan felt increasingly disappointed as they walked closer and closer to Bamboo Scroll Lake. This was because Qian Pingyan didn't say a single word to him the entire time, similar to how he had ignored his rotten friends and pushed them away. However, this wasn't the strangest thing in Gu Kan's eyes. Rather, it was the fact that Qian Pingyan didn't seem like he was purposely suppressing a ball of raging anger. He appeared absent-minded instead, and more accurately, it looked like Qian Pingyan was completely immersed in his own thoughts. This allowed Gu Kan to breathe a soft sigh of relief. Gu Kan was most afraid of Qian Pingyan not saying a single word as he walked over to slap him twice before turning around to walk away and leave. They might never meet each other again after that, and even if they did meet by coincidence, they would merely be two strangers. After they boarded the Luchuan, the small catfish followed behind them with the Golden Courtier assassin in tow. Gu Kan asked in a careful voice, "Qian Pingyan, maybe I should release this assassin? I'm in a good mood today, so it won't matter much if I release her." Qian Pingyan paused briefly, yet he didn't stop and continued to walk forward. Gu Kan clearly noticed the fury and disappointment that Qian Pingyan felt at that moment. However, Gu Kan didn't understand why his words and his actions were once again wrong in Qian Pingyan's eyes. And thus, he turned his head around, clasping his hands inside his opposite sleeves as he twisted his neck and continued to walk forward. His eyes were extremely cold as he gazed at the assassin. It was all because of this cursed lady who had chosen to charge out today to make an attempt on his life. It was because of her that he had angered Qian Pingyan. She truly deserved to die. Even executing her entire clan wouldn't be enough. After arriving at the bow of the ship, Qian Pingyan stood still and gazed at the lake by himself. Gu Kan felt aggrieved and sulky, yet he wanted to stand a little closer to Qian Pingyan at the same time. In the end, he could only stand several steps behind Qian Pingyan, not even daring to stand shoulder to shoulder with him. At this moment, the assassin who felt like she had finally found a flicker of hope suddenly fell to her knees and vigorously kowtowed to Qian Pingyan, saying, "I'm begging you, please let me go. I know you're a good person, someone with the heart of a bodhisattva, so I beg you to please tell Gu Kan to forgive me this one time. If you spare me, I'll construct an archway and shrine for Benefactor in the future, and I'll offer incense and kowtow to Benefactor every day. If Benefactor wants, I'm even willing to become a slave for Gu Kan." The small catfish moved its finger slightly. Gu Kan surprisingly smiled at this moment, turning around and shaking his head at the small catfish. He allowed the assassin to earnestly kowtow and beg for her life, with the deck of the luchuan thudding loudly as she banged her head against it. Qian Ping'an shakily grabbed his sword-nurturing gourd and drank a large mouthful of wine. Only after doing this did he turn around, not to look at the woman who was calling him a good person with the heart of a bodhisattva, but to look at Gu Kan and ask, "Why not kill just her?" Gu Kan's expression was serious as he replied, "Just killing her alone isn't effective because there are far too many people who like to seek death in Bamboo Scroll Lake. You might not know this, Qian Ping'an, but one will definitely be treated as a kind-hearted bodhisattva if one only kills their direct enemies in this lawless land. The tens of thousands of vagrant cultivators and those people who have joined the forces of the various islands and lakeside cities will all look down on and laugh at such a person." Perhaps afraid that Qian Ping'an wouldn't believe him, Gu Kan turned around and asked the small catfish, "Isn't that right? I'm not lying to Qian Ping'an, am I?" The small catfish that was most unruly and unrestrained in Bamboo Scroll Lake nodded timidly in confirmation. As someone who had advanced to the Golden Courtier and dared to come here to assassinate Gu Kan, the kowtowing woman naturally wasn't a stupid person. She instantly understood the implications behind the middle-aged man's words. She could be killed? She immediately felt as if she had been plunged into a glacial pit, and her eyes darted around as she lowered her head. Qian Ping'an looked at her and asked, "If I can guarantee that I'll only kill you and allow everyone else related to you to live on, what would you do?" The woman looked up with teary eyes and replied, "I know you're a good person, so why can't you let me go as well? I know that I'm wrong. I shouldn't have tried to assassinate Gu Kan, and I guarantee that I'll definitely avoid Gu Kan in the future. I'm begging you, saving a life is more meritorious than building a 7-story pagoda. So please let me go as well. I'm begging you. If you and your companion succeeded in assassinating Gu Kan today, would you have let his mother go if she kneeled down and begged for her life?" Qian Ping'an asked slowly, "Tell me your honest thoughts." The woman wiped away her tears and replied, "Even if I were willing to spare Gu Kan, that sword cultivator from the luminous Vermilion Empire would have definitely stepped forward to kill him. However, if Gu Kan begged me to spare his mother, then I would have definitely granted his wish and protected that innocent woman. I definitely wouldn't have allowed her to suffer further humiliation." There was a dazzling smile on Gu Kan's face. He obviously knew that the woman was spewing nonsense. She was trying to stay alive after all, so what nonsense wouldn't she spew? Gu Kan wasn't surprised at all. In any case, what difference would she make? If Qian Ping'an were willing to accept this and not become angry at him, then so be it if he released 1 or 2 measly ants. To say nothing of her worthless life as a Golden Courtier Earth Immortal, Gu Kan cared little about the life of her clan as well. They were measly ants whose ambitions, promises and cultivation bases were simply worthless. Gu Kan didn't care about them at all. Indeed, had he not purposely taken a small detour on the way to the banquet just to have some fun? Was he not messing around with these assassins who mistakenly thought they were about to succeed? Qian Ping'an looked at Gu Kan and said slowly, "It would have been fine for you to kill her on the street, and it's also okay for you to kill her here. It's fine even if you kill her after we arrive at Cyan Gorge Island." Gu Kan faltered upon hearing this. "What did you call her when we were on the street?" Qian Ping'an asked. Gu Kan thought for a moment before replying, "Auntie." "And how do I refer to your mom?" Qian Ping'an asked. "Also Auntie," Gu Kan replied in a gloomy voice. "A family should be orderly and reunited," Qian Ping'an murmured. The rims of Gu Kan's eyes suddenly became red as he lowered his head and said, "What do you want me to do? Should I kill her or let her go? What should I do so you don't get angry and ignore me? Tell me, Qian Ping'an, and I'll do whatever you say." Qian Ping'an turned around and replied, "It's up to you. After I visit Auntie at Cyan Gorge Island, I might leave after saying what I want to say." Qian Ping'an didn't say anything else. Tears brimmed in Gu Kan's eyes as he gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. Gu Kan had a mental connection with the small catfish, so there was no need for the young boy to say anything as the small catfish directly plucked the Golden Courtier Earth Immortal from the floor as if she were a little chick. The small catfish then tossed her into a secret room and locked her up. Qian Ping'an remained standing at the bow of the ship the entire time. In the meantime, Gu Kan walked to the top level of the luchuan, feeling upset and confused as he smashed all of the cups on the table. The open-collar ladies in the room were all filled with fear and trepidation. unsure of why their always smiling young master had become so grumpy today. The small catfish also felt slightly gloomy and distressed as it stood to the side. Gukan looked up and stared at the small catfish, smiling as he said in a smug voice, "Don't be scared, small catfish, Chan Ping'an is just annoyed with me. This always happened when we were little, and he would always ignore me if I ever made him unhappy. He would ignore me no matter how I followed him and said good things about him. It was exactly the same as today. However, he would still help Mom and me whenever he saw us getting harassed or bullied by those bad people in the small town. Afterward, Chan Ping'an would definitely forgive me if I cried and screamed for a while. It's a shame that my 2 trails of snot have now disappeared. Those were my strongest immortal treasures, you know? Every time Chan Ping'an helped my mom and me, he couldn't help himself but smile whenever he saw me sniff. He wouldn't be angry at me anymore after that." The small catfish nodded in understanding. Only itself and Gukan knew why it had taken a step back on the street just then. It was genuinely afraid of Chan Ping'an. This was a sense of respect, reverence, and fear that pertained to the foundations of its great Tao. Perhaps even Chan Ping'an, the entire Jewel's small world, as well as Gukan's master, river-severing true Lord Lu Jimao, didn't know of the true reason. This was because the small catfish was very different from the golden carp that Li Er had carried around in the Dragon King basket, and the 4-legged snake in Song Jisen's courtyard. Indeed, Chan Ping'an's ability to catch the small catfish by himself was a huge fated opportunity in and of itself. This was a fated opportunity that belonged to Chan Ping'an. It was the only fated opportunity that Chan Ping'an had grabbed with his own hands, and had the opportunity to keep in the Jewel's small world. However, acting in accordance with his true self, Chan Ping'an had given the small catfish to Gukan, who had also been acting according to his true self and shamelessly asked him for the small catfish. In other words, Chan Ping'an had essentially given away his fated opportunity and transformed it into a fated opportunity pertaining to the great Tao for Gukan. Even so, this didn't stop the small catfish from continuing to view Chan Ping'an as half a master. Even though Chan Ping'an definitely couldn't control the small catfish that had already advanced to the nascent tier, it still wouldn't dare to harm him unless its current master, Gukan, gave it an absolute order to do so. Only then would it dare to target Chan Ping'an. Gukan suddenly rested his arms and head on the table and said, "Small catfish, apart from my mom, Chan Ping'an is the only other person in the world who's genuinely willing to give the very best things to me." This was the case both before and after he started working in the dragon kills. Once he earned a tiny amount of money, he would buy snacks for me without so much as a frown whenever I became peckish. This was money that he was reluctant to spend on himself. Not only that, but he would lie to me and say that he had earned a huge amount of money. I only realized this later when Lu Xianying accidentally let slip Chan Ping'an's secret. "Small catfish, why do you think Chan Ping'an is angry?" The small catfish shook its head in response. Gukan turned around with his forehead against the table and his hands inside his opposite sleeves as he asked, "Then small catfish, how long will Chan Ping'an stay angry at me this time?" I don't even dare to mention the matter regarding these open collar ladies to him right now. What should I do? Tears streamed down Gukan's cheeks as he continued, "I know that Chan Ping'an is different this time. In the past it was always other people bullying my mom and me, so he would always feel sympathy for me whenever he saw this. He wouldn't disown me as a little brother regardless of how misbehaved I was and how angry he became. However, things are different now, and my mom and I are already living very good lives. Because of this, Chan Ping'an will feel like we can live very comfortably even if he isn't around anymore. So, he'll continue to stay angry at me, and he'll continue to ignore me for the rest of his life. But I want to tell him that this isn't the case. I'll feel very sad if Chan Ping'an isn't around anymore. I'll feel sad for the rest of my life. If Chan Ping'an wants to ignore me, then I won't stop him from doing so. I'll simply tell him that if he dares to ignore me, then I'll become a bigger baddie than right now. I'll do even more bad things, so much so that Chan Ping'an will hear the name Gukan no matter where he goes in the Eastern Treasured Vile Continent, be that the Parasol Leaf Continent or the Middle Earth Divine Continent." Gukan covered his face with his hands. This was the second time that Gukan had displayed his weak side after arriving at Bamboo Scroll Lake. The first time was during the Mid-Autumn Festival on Cyan Gorge Island, where he had also discussed Chan Ping'an with his mother. There was a mental connection between Gukan and the small catfish that connected their joy and sorrow, So the small catfish also started to shed tears with the young boy. The Luchuan finally arrived at Cyan Gorge Island. When disembarking the ship, Qian Ping'an retrieved a jade tablet and handed it to the small catfish, saying in a solemn voice, "Give this to Lu Zhimao and tell him to take care of it first. He can return it to me when I leave Cyan Gorge Island. Also, tell him that he shouldn't show himself before me when I'm still on Cyan Gorge Island." The small catfish accepted the jade tablet. Yet it was as if a small child had grabbed onto a scorching hot piece of coal that was still glowing red. It instantly released a high-pitched scream that reverberated through the heavens, and it almost transformed back into its true form that measured hundreds of meters in length, yearning to obliterate the dock of Cyan Gorge Island in a single strike. Just as it was about to throw the jade tablet away, Qian Ping'an ordered expressionlessly, "Hold on to it." The small catfish was filled with fear, and it forcefully endured the excruciating pain as it tightly gripped the strange jade tablet inscribed with the characters, "Nourishing the noble spirit," and went to look for the river severing true lord. There were already people waiting to welcome them at the dock, and all of them behaved extremely servilely and obsequiously toward Gu. "Can please tell Auntie that I want to eat a normal family meal again. I'll be happy as long as there's a bowl of rice for me," Qian Ping'an said to Gu. Gu nodded earnestly. He was happy as long as Qian Ping'an was willing to sit down to eat with him, so he instructed an old cultivator, a steward, to make haste and return to his residence to notify his mom. There was no need for fancy and extravagant food, and she simply needed to prepare an ordinary family meal. Gu led the way, and Qian Ping'an slowly walked beside him. "I've already been in Pondwater City for many days, and I asked many people about matters related to you and Cyan Gorge Island. I was able to hear many stories," Qian Ping'an suddenly said. "I already guessed." Gu hung his head and replied, "There are some things that I'm afraid I won't dare to say at the dining table, so before meeting Auntie, what I say next might not be what you like to hear," Qian Ping'an continued. "However, I hope that regardless of whether you like it or not, and whether you think it's absolute bullshit and nonsense or not, you can let me finish speaking first. Can you do this? After I finish speaking, you can also speak your mind to me. I hope that you won't be like the assassin just then. You don't need to worry about whether I like your words or not. I want to listen to your true thoughts, so say whatever is in your mind." You can speak and I'll listen," Gu replied. "Sorry, it's my fault for coming so late," Qian Ping'an said slowly. Gu suddenly stopped in his tracks. Qian Ping'an also stopped. In the curious eyes of all the cultivators on Cyan Gorge Island, Qian Ping'an was nothing more than a middle-aged man with a listless expression. This wasn't necessarily reflected on his face, but the eyes were a reflection of one's heart, so it was impossible for Qian Ping'an to conceal his weariness. The parting between the young boy in straw sandals and the little boy with 2 trails of snot in Clay Vase Alley had been far too hurried, so apart from some matters regarding the locust leaves, telling Gu to be careful of Lu Zhimao, and telling the very young boy to look after his mother, Qian Ping'an hadn't had time to say the many other things on his mind. Qian Ping'an looked up at the mountain peak of Cyan Gorge Island and said, "I left the small town very soon after the snotty little kid left. I started to travel around the cultivation world, and I encountered some challenges and difficulties here and there. So, there was one thing that I was very afraid of. I was afraid that the snotty little kid would turn into the type of person that you and I hated the most when we were in the small town. A man who liked to harass women who were alone at home, who liked to bully the women's children if they were strong enough, and would casually kick children on the streets when they were drunk, causing the children to tumble along the ground. Because of this, the first thing I always worried about when thinking of Gu was whether the snotty little kid was living a peaceful and comfortable life. The next thing I worried about was what the snotty little kid who was best at bearing grudges would become like if he was enjoying a peaceful and comfortable life. Once he became stronger and more capable, would he slowly turn into the type of person who would kick children and disregard their lives when he was in a bad mood? Would the beaten child be aching in pain afterward? Would he be rescued by Qian Ping'an? And would his mother feel pained and bring him to the Yang family's medicine shop where she needed to spend many copper coins to buy some medicine, causing their lives to become even more difficult in the following weeks and months? I was very afraid of this. However, I can't blame anyone else but myself. It was my fault for returning directly to the small town from the Great Sway Nation on my first journey. And it was my fault for not being willing to take a detour and delay the delivery of the sword by just a few months on my second journey when I clearly needed to travel south to Old Dragon City already. That way, I could have visited the snotty little kid and his mother to see if they were still doing okay. Instead, I learned that they were seemingly doing quite well and not in any life-threatening danger through some pieces of news, so I felt like I could visit them later when I also became stronger and more impressive. That way I could give the snotty little kid a few more things. With this in mind, I convinced myself that I could visit them later. One is responsible for their own life and death when traveling through the cultivation world. You killed the guest elder on Cyan Gorge Island, you killed your senior brother, and you killed 2 assassins today. If I were present, then I would have helped you kill them even if you were unwilling to or unable to. When it comes to these kinds of people, I'll kill however many of them come my way. If 10,000 of them come my way and I only manage to kill 9,999 of them, then I'll blame my fists for not being strong enough and my sword for not being quick enough. After all, I promised you and promised myself that I would protect the snotty little kid. This is the most logical thing in the world, and there doesn't need to be a reason behind why I'm doing this. There doesn't need to be a reason at all. You have 1,001 reasons to convince yourself and convince me that Bamboo Scroll Lake is a filthy place, just a lawless region where others will charge over to kill us if we don't kill them first. However, these aren't reasons that can justify your killing of innocent people. So many people died mysteriously without even knowing the reason for their own deaths. You Gukin might be able to get over the mental hurdle in your mind, but I, Chun Ping'an, can't. I'll think that the tens upon hundreds of people are tens upon hundreds of little snotty kids like the one who always followed behind me in Clayvase Alley in the past. They're like tens upon hundreds of country bumpkins working in the Dragon Kills. Yet all of these people are now dead. However, the Chun Ping'an who was unwilling to knock on his neighbor's doors as he paced up and down Clayvase Alley even though he was on the verge of starving to death isn't dead. And the snotty little kid who was randomly kicked by a drunkard back then isn't dead either. Chun Ping'an paused for a moment, patting Gukan's shoulder before continuing. Let's go, Auntie is still waiting for us. No matter how difficult to traverse the path in front of us is, we still have to walk forward no matter what. The two of them walked side by side as they continued forward. I, Chun Ping'an, don't want to become a sage of morality, Chun Ping'an said slowly. However, not becoming a sage of morality doesn't then imply that we can completely disregard morals and reason. I don't care whether other people speak reason or not, but I care whether you Gu can speak reason or not. Even though I don't know if this will change anything, I at least have to give it a try. I had no relatives left following my parents' death, so Lu Xianying and you are essentially like my relatives. The world is so vast, yet in the small town Lu Xianying and you are my only relatives. I can turn a blind eye if the sky collapses in any part of the world. However, if the sky truly collapses and threatens the two of you, then I'll definitely attempt to push the sky back no matter how strong or weak I am at that time. Even if I can't push it back or hold it still, I'll definitely seek justice for the two of you. Several years ago in the Jewel's small world, Chun Ping'an had once thought that he may as well die for the sake of saving Lu Xianying. He would seek justice for Lu Xianying no matter the cost. Now that he was in Bamboo Scroll Lake, Chun Ping'an felt like he had exhausted all of his spirit and energy to say these few words. It was a different experience from before. This was a matter that had caused Chun Ping'an to sit by himself like a dog sitting on the side of the street. If I weren't friends with you, Gu Kan, then I wouldn't care even if I heard about you flipping the world upside down in Bamboo Scroll Lake. I wouldn't have traveled to Pond Water City, and I wouldn't have traveled to Cyan Gorge Island. My abilities are limited, so I wouldn't have been able to do anything even if I cared. I ignored the matters at the residence of the female ghost in the wedding dress, and I also ignored the sword cultivators whom I encountered at the Yellow Court Nation. I involved myself in the matters at the Flood Dragon Trench, and I lost the mountain seal that Mr. Chi gave me as a result. I involved myself in the matters at Old Dragon City, and my abdomen was severely wounded by a cultivator as a result. In this world, one has to pay a price for speaking reason. However, one equally has to pay a price for not speaking reason. The old flood dragon at the Flood Dragon Trench was almost killed by a sword cultivator, and Du Mao was also beaten half dead by someone. This was the case for them, so this will also be the case for you, Gu Kan. You might be enjoying life now, but what about tomorrow? What about next week? What about next year? And the year after. You can force other people to reunite right now, so someone else can equally force you and your mom to reunite in the underworld in the future. If it's possible, I wish that the snotty little kid called Gu can continue to live at the end of Clay Vase Alley. I wish that I never gave you the small catfish back then. I wish that you simply stayed at Clay Vase Alley where I could visit you and Auntie every time I returned home. Regardless of whether you became slightly wealthier or I became slightly wealthier, you and your mom would be able to buy nice clothes and eat delicious foods. You would be able to enjoy a calm and peaceful life. They approached the brightly lit residence that was no inferior to the residences of officials and wealthy nobles. There was a dejected look on Chan Pingan's face as he continued in a soft voice. I've already said everything I want to say, and I don't have the energy to say anything else. So, it's your turn to say whatever you want when we eat in a moment. I'll listen to everything you have to say. Guken raised his arm and wiped his face, not saying anything in response. The entrance of the residence was very large, and once they entered, it took them a very long time just to walk to the dining room. When Chan Pingan stepped over the door threshold, he had already removed the mask that Julien had carefully crafted for him, revealing his true appearance. A woman dressed in extravagant clothes was standing at the entrance of the large hall, and looking around in anticipation. When she saw Chan Pingan enter the hall with Gu Kan, the rims of her eyes instantly became red. She quickly walked over to Chan Pingan and carefully looked him up and down. Chan Pingan had already grown much taller, and the woman was filled with mixed emotions as she covered her mouth with a hand, unable to say anything even though there were so many things that she wanted to say. In reality, the woman felt extremely guilty in the depths of her heart. When Lu Jimao had visited and told her about the small catfish back then, she had developed sinister thoughts at that instant, thinking that as long as this fated opportunity could stay with her canner, then it would be best that their young neighbor in Clay Vase Alley who had helped her and her son for so many years, just go away and die. Hi Auntie, I hope you're doing well. Chan Pingan greeted with a smile. The woman choked up and replied, I'm doing very well just like Canner, both of us are doing very well. Hurry up and come in. The steward of the island was in a great rush when he notified me of your arrival, so I was only able to cook 2 dishes. The servants in the residence helped cook the remaining dishes. However, they were all made according to the tastes of our hometown. So they're definitely the most authentic home-style cooking. It will definitely suit your tastes, Chan Pingan. I'm sorry for troubling you, Chan Pingan said. The woman shot a glare at him and retorted, What nonsense are you speaking? Chan Pingan didn't say anything else. The mother and her son as well as an outsider whom neither of them viewed as such entered the dining hall together and sat down. Even though the dishes were all family-style dishes, they were still incredibly delectable, and filled up the entire table. Gu Kan's mother also prepared the rarest and most valuable immortal Crow Ka wine of Bamboo Scroll Lake, something that was completely different from the so-called Crow Ka wine sold on the streets of Pond Water City. She poured a cup of wine for Chan Pingan, and Chan Pingan couldn't turn down her offer no matter what he said. In fact, even Gu Kan, someone who didn't like to drink wine and never drank at home, asked his mom for a cup of wine today. His mom faltered for a moment before smiling and pouring a cup of wine for him. She sat in the host's seat of the large round table, while Chan Pingan sat with his back facing the door of the dining room. Gu Kan sat between the two of them. Gu Kan turned around to look at his mom, saying, I want to say something to Chan Pingan before we eat. His mom was a very observant person to begin with, so she had already noticed that something was not quite right between Canner and Chan Pingan. Even so, she continued to smile as she replied, That's not an issue at all. Feel free to chat, and I'll help you refill your wine when you finish your cup. Gu Kan finished his wine in a single gulp, after which he placed his hand on top of his cup to signify that he didn't need any more to drink. He then turned to Chan Pingan and said, Chan Pingan, what do you think I need to do in order to protect my mom? Do you know how many times either my mom or I were almost killed on Cyan Gorge Island? The woman's heart shuddered, and her expression was stiff as she sat there and clenched the hem of her clothes with her hands. Perhaps I should only kill the people who target me? Then what about the people behind the scenes who send the assassins after me? What about those ill-intentioned people who are lurking even further in the distance? Gu Kan asked. Maybe I should visit them one by one to greet them first? Perhaps I should speak reason with them, saying that I'm very powerful and the small catfish is even more powerful, so they shouldn't come over to provoke me or else I'll beat them to death. Do you think that all of the assassination attempts I've faced on Cyan Gorge Island are because of outsiders and enemies? Have you not considered the possibility that they were perhaps organized by my good master Lu Jimao? Chun Ping'an, you might answer me by saying not necessarily, and yes, that might indeed be the case. I won't lie to you and say that Lu Jimao was definitely involved in those assassination attempts. However, I only have one mom, and I only have one life, so why should I gamble on these possibilities? Gukan stood up and exclaimed in anger. Chun Ping'an, I definitely won't fight back, even if you beat me to death today. However, before I'm beaten to death by you, I want to tell you that I, Gukan, didn't do anything wrong. Even if I did, I'm not going to admit it. I'm not going to change. I won't change for the rest of my life. And I won't change even if it means death. Gukan's expression was twisted, yet unlike normal, he wasn't feeling anger and resentment toward the person he was looking at. Instead, he detested himself, the entire Bamboo Scroll Lake, and everyone else in the world. It was because of these things that the person whom he cared about the most didn't understand his extreme grievances. I'm essentially asking a tiger for its skin in this place, so if I don't rip their skin off and wrap it around myself, then I'll end up freezing to death. If we don't eat their flesh and drink their blood, then my mom and I will starve to death. Chun Ping'an, I'm telling you that this place isn't our home, Clay Vase Alley. There aren't just repulsive adults who steal my mom's clothes. The people here will completely devour my mom, not even leaving behind any bones. They'll make her suffer agony that's even worse than death. In the same way, I won't just come across drunken bastards in the alleys who kick me simply because they don't like the way I look. Do you know how scared I am in this place? Do you know how much I wished you were always by my side and protecting mom, and me just like before? Chun Ping'an, you don't know. You only know how to hit me and scold me. In the end, tears streamed down Gukan's face as he sobbed. I don't want the next reunion between you, my mom, and me to be at a grave in Bamboo Scroll Lake where you're offering incense and wine to us. I want to be able to see you again, Chun Ping'an. Gukan continued to sob as he ran out of the dining room. He didn't run far, however, and he sat himself down on the door threshold. Chun Ping'an didn't run after Gukan, and he instead looked at Gukan's mother and said in a hoarse voice, Auntie, I'm not going to drink today. Can you please give me a bowl of rice? Feeling frightened and uneasy, Gukan's mother hurriedly wiped away her tears before nodding and walking away to bring Chun Ping'an a bowl of rice. Chun Ping'an stood up to accept the bowl of rice, and he gently placed it on the table before sitting back down. There was once again a bowl of rice on the table. When sitting in his neighbor's house in Clay Vase Alley back then, Chun Ping'an had been a little boy even younger than Gukan was right now. A bowl of rice had been sitting on the table in front of him just. Chun Ping'an raised a slightly shaking hand, yet he ultimately didn't pick up his chopsticks. Instead, he retrieved a book from his robes and placed it beside the bowl of rice. This was an old and yellowing fist guide. Chun Ping'an reached over and gently straightened the cover. This book had accompanied Chun Ping'an for tens of thousands of kilometers, witnessing the vast and extraordinary world and witnessing all of his joys, sorrows, reunions, and partings. He had read the fist guide countless times, yet the book was still very tidy and almost without a single crease. Chun Ping'an had only allowed the old man in the bamboo building to read it once, yet he had wanted Cui Chan's grandfather to take more care when turning each page, nagging him about it countless times and ending up being rewarded with another beating. Cui Chan's grandfather had scolded him and said that how could someone who practiced martial arts be so attached to a useless book? How could he hope to capture the world inside his fist intent? Of course, Chun Ping'an had also shown the book to the girl whom he liked. However, they hadn't expressed their feelings to each other back then. And Chun Ping'an had only shown her the book for the sake of learning how to read. He had wanted to know what the fist guide was all about. In fact, Chun Ping'an had also ticked her off back then, with Ningyao mistakenly thinking that Chun Ping'an was looking down on her, and suspecting that she was trying to secretly learn the measly fist techniques. The bowl of rice had been a life-saving grace. The fist guide had also been a life-saving grace. Chun Ping'an bit his lip, not turning around as he said in a quiet voice, Gukan, we agreed back then that I was only borrowing this fist guide from you, and that I would eventually return it to you one day. Gukan immediately stood up, roaring in anger. No, I don't want it back. I gave it to you, so it's yours now. You mentioned returning it back then, but I never agreed to this. You need to be reasonable. In the end, Gukan was sobbing as he pleaded. Chen Ping'an, please don't be. I'm afraid. In the eyes of the child, who was extreme yet very intelligent for his age, Chen Ping'an was the only person in the world who spoke reason. It had always been. Chen Ping'an didn't say anything, and he picked up his chopsticks and lowered his head as he started to eat rice. He didn't look up again the entire time he ate the bowl of rice. After Gukan turned down Chen Ping'an's offer to return the fist technique manual, his mother lowered her head, and her entire body was trembling, but it was unclear whether it was from anger or sorrow. Chen Ping'an gently set down his chopsticks, then called out, Gukan, I'm here. Gukan immediately replied loudly as he wiped away his tears. I will beat you, I will scold you, I will lecture you on the principles that I believe to be right, even if you don't agree with them at all. I'll do all of that, but I won't abandon you or leave you to your own devices, Chen Ping'an said, and his voice wasn't very loud, but there was an air of determination to it, as if he were speaking to both Gukan and himself. If I leave someday, then that must mean that I was able to get over the hurdle in my heart. If I'm unable to get over it, then I'll continue to stay here on Cyan Gorge Island. I believe you. You've never lied to me before, Gukan said as a bright smile broke through his tears. I might have to break that rule today, Chen Ping'an suddenly said, and Gukan's entire body immediately tensed as his heart leaped to the base of his throat. On the way here, I said that I would only listen to you speak at the table, and I won't speak any further. However, now that I've had something to eat, I've regained some energy, so I feel like talking again. As usual, I'll speak and you'll listen. Once I'm done, it'll be my turn to listen if you wish to speak. Regardless of who it is that's speaking, the one who listens must do so with respect and only interject when absolutely necessary, Chen Ping'an said. A bright smile appeared on Gukan's face, and he scratched his own head as he asked, Can I return to the table? I still haven't eaten yet. Chen Ping'an nodded in response. Gukan wiped a hand over his face, then made his way back to his original spot at the table before moving his chair a little closer to Chen Ping'an's. He was terrified that Chen Ping'an would go back on his word and suddenly decide to leave Cyan Gorge Island. If that were to happen, then he would be able to intercept Chen Ping'an in a more timely fashion by sitting closer to him. After that, Gukan rushed away to fill a bowl of rice for himself, then sat down and began shoveling it down his own mouth. He had always liked to copy Chen Ping'an, imitating the way that he ate and the way that he clasped his hands together in his sleeves. Neither of them had any friends outside of each other back in the small town, and during winter, they always liked to huddle together with their hands clasped together within their sleeves, particularly after they had just built a snowman. They would shiver together with their hands tucked up their sleeves, then burst into laughter as they made fun of each other. When it came to delivering insults, Gukan had always been far more proficient than Chen Ping'an, so Gukan always came out on top in their wars of words. Chen Ping'an took a glance at Gukan, then turned to his mother as he asked, Auntie, if another child comes to linger outside your door today, would you still open the door for him and give him a bowl of rice? Would you still intentionally tell him that the rice wasn't free, and that he would have to compensate you by selling medicinal herbs? The woman carefully pondered the question, but before she had a chance to reply, Chen Ping'an mused to himself, I don't think you would. Of course, I don't think that's wrong of you. Setting aside the current environment of Bamboo Scroll Lake, even if you hadn't done that all those years ago, I still wouldn't think that you had done anything wrong. Hence, I'm never going to forget that bowl of rice that you gave me for the rest of my life. It also put my heart at ease that you asked for compensation for the bowl of rice. Before she passed, my mother told me to never resort to begging, so the fact that I had to pay you back for the bowl of rice meant that I didn't have to disappoint my mother in the afterlife. The woman turned away to wipe some tears from her eyes. Chen Ping'an's voice remained calm and placid as he continued. But have you considered this? Without that bowl of rice, I would have never given that catfish to your son, and you may still be living on Clayvase Alley right now, leading a very impoverished and difficult life. Hence we have to believe in karma, that doing good deeds will beget good karma, and vice versa. At the same time, when our lives take a turn for the better, we can't only believe in good deeds leading to good karma, and forget that bad deeds will also result in bad karma. Do you think what I'm saying is correct? The woman continued to shed tears in silence, neither agreeing with nor denying Chan Ping'an's statement. She was afraid that regardless of what she said, it would have a negative impact on her son's future, so she would rather not say anything. Chan Ping'an was aware of this, so even though Gu Qin had revealed to him the decision that the woman had made on that catfish back then, he still didn't feel any resentment toward her. Gratitude was something that one should carry for an entire lifetime. Regardless of what happened thereafter, nothing could erase that initial act of kindness. It was just like the streets and alleys of the small town. No matter how thick a layer of snow accumulated during winter, once spring arrived and the snow melted away, all of those familiar streets and alleys would be revealed once again. The only difference was that after embarking on such a long journey, Chan Ping'an had learned not to force his own principles upon others, and that was why he had been willing to listen to everything that Gu Qin had to say in order to understand his thoughts and feelings. Chan Ping'an forced a smile onto his own face as he continued, "Don't worry, Auntie, I won't force Gu Qin to be like me. It's not necessary, and it's also beyond the realm of my capabilities. I just want to try and see if I can do some things that both Gu Qin and I feel are correct. I may be staying here, but I won't hinder Gu Qin from protecting you, and I certainly won't ask you to give up your current life of wealth and comfort. Is that all right?" The woman was hesitant for a long while before ultimately giving a difficult nod. Chan Ping'an remained seated, and he didn't reach for the flagon of Crocaw wine on the table, nor did he remove his sword-nurturing gourd from his own waist. After a brief silence he continued, "I have a piece of good news for you and Gu Qin. Uncle Gu may be dead, but he's not actually dead. He's still in this world because he became a Yin entity, and that's ultimately a good thing. I came here to Bamboo Scroll Lake because he took a massive risk to come and tell me that things aren't going to go as smoothly for the two of you here as they appear on the surface. I came here because I don't want Gu Qin's actions to erase the chances of a reunion between the three of you someday. My parents always said that Uncle Gu was the most fitting husband for you out of all of the men in the nearby alleys. He was a good man, someone who was capable of writing out beautiful couplets, someone who was more like a scholar than a farmer, and I don't want a good man like him to be sad." The woman clasped a hand over her own mouth as the tears broke through the floodgates. These were the most genuine tears that she had shed thus far, and they had nothing to do with right or wrong. "You, Gu Qin, and I have all suffered immensely in the past at the hands of unreasonable individuals, and none of us were born into privileged situations where we didn't have to worry about food and shelter. We were not people who could have chosen to be civilized and educated just because we wanted to. I'm sure you and I have both had moments in our lives when it almost became too difficult to continue living. You overcame those moments for Gu Qin's sake, while I lived on for the memory of my late parents. Both of us had to grit our teeth and muster up every last ounce of our willpower to persevere through those moments. So we understand hardship better than most other people. Even though Gu Qin is the youngest of the three of us, he has experienced the most hardship out of all of us since leaving Clay Vase Alley. Even at such a young age, he's having to lead an even more difficult life than me and you, because no matter how impoverished we were, no matter how arduous our lives became, we never had to worry about death every single day like Gu Qin is right now. However, that doesn't take away our right to ask why during the most difficult moments of our lives. But no one will come to tell us why, so eventually, once we've endured enough hardships, we eventually become desensitized and stop asking why. It's not like there's any point in considering such questions anyway. When we're fighting just to survive, thinking about anything feels wrong. We are wrong, everyone else is wrong, this world is wrong. This world has beaten me down, so why can't I retaliate? It seems like everyone who lives through tough times like those end up becoming unreasonable people. They become unwilling to hear others explain to them why because they no longer care about the answer. They always feel like as soon as they let their hard and unyielding facade slip for even a single moment, then everything that they've fought so hard for will be taken away, and that they'll be disregarding all of the painful lessons that their hardships have taught them. Why do the teachers at school favor the children from wealthy families? Why do my parents have to be looked down on by my neighbors? Why is it that my peers are able to afford paper kites, while I can only watch enviously as the kites are flown? Why is it that I have to work myself to the bone in the fields, while so many other people are able to live lives of comfort and leisure and look down on me whenever we cross paths? Why is it that some people are born with everything that we worked so hard for, yet they don't even know to appreciate it? Why is it that all of the other households are able to enjoy reunions on the Moon Festival every year? I don't know why things are, and I don't know what things were like 100 years ago or 10,000 years ago, so I don't know if the state of the world has improved or gotten worse. I've read many books and gleaned some principles from them, but the more I learn, the more uncertain I become of whether the principles that I've thought of in my head are correct. Not only that, but are my principles necessarily going to be able to make a positive change in my life and the lives of those around me? Prior to coming here, I had a little girl by my side, and at the time I felt like I could make her life better. However, after seeing Gukin, I realized that perhaps I was wrong. The little girl could only live a slightly better life when she's with me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the principles I imparted upon her could allow her to live an easier or better life. Everyone wants to live, and everyone wants to live well. Who doesn't want every single tomorrow to be better than today? I want that as well. Back in Clay Vase Alley, on the journey to the Great Sway Nation, to Stalactite Mountain, to the Parasol Leaf Continent, to the Lotus Flower Blessed Land, then back home. At all of those points in time, I've been constantly hoping for a better life. However, even if there aren't paramount principles that can transcend above all else under the heavens, at the very least, there are basic concepts of right and wrong, are there not? Even if we were forced to do many things for the sake of survival, those things can still be categorized as right or wrong, can they not? Gukan's chopsticks fell still as he fell into deep thought. The woman took a glance at Chan Ping'an, then at Gukan, and she said, Chan Ping'an, I'm just an illiterate woman who's never read a book in her life, so I don't understand all of that. I don't think about so many things, nor do I have the capacity to consider so many things. All I want is for Gukan and I to live and live well. It's only because we were able to survive to this point that we had the chance to hear from you that my husband is still alive, and that a reunion is still possible for our family. Can you understand what I'm trying to convey, Chan Ping'an? I hope you won't denounce me for my ignorance. I can understand, and I certainly won't look down on you, Chan Ping'an replied with a nod. The woman looked into Chan Ping'an's eyes for a moment, then poured herself a cup of wine before downing it in one go. She then poured herself another cup of wine before immediately downing that as well. No matter what you said to Canner, he's very happy that you came to see him, so I have to drink to that. I also have to drink to the piece of good news that you brought to us. She then downed a third cup of wine, and tears were swimming in her eyes as she concluded. Most importantly of all, you've grown so tall and mature, and you're still safe and sound. That's more worthy of celebration than anything. So that's one more thing that I had to drink to. Chan Ping'an poured a cup of wine for himself before downing it as well. Inside the pavilion in Pond Water City, Chui Chan mused. That woman from Clay Vase Alley is far from ignorant as she claims. In fact, she's nothing short of remarkable. No wonder she was able to work together with Lu Jimao to raise someone like Gu Kan. While Chan Ping'an followed the two horse-drawn carriages into the city, Chui Dongshan had played dead the entire time. But he had already opened his eyes when Chan Ping'an revealed himself to Gu Kan. Hence, just like Chui Chan, he had seen and heard everything that had happened from that point onward. Chui Chan smiled as he continued. Chan Ping'an's words are completely wasted here. Even though they had all come from Clay Vase Alley and initially experienced similar hardships, right now, Gu Kan and Chan Ping'an are two completely different people, not just in their respective standpoints but in the way that they see this world. They are vastly different on a fundamental level. And Chan Ping'an is only able to empathize with Gu Kan because he's embarked on such a long journey, but the same does not apply to Gu Kan. To him, the entire world is comprised solely of Clay Vase Alley and Bamboo Scroll Lake. On top of that, he has a very narrow-minded personality that often leads him to emotional extremes. Even if his father were currently standing before him in Chan Ping'an's place, he still wouldn't be able to alter Gu Kan's personality. What's interesting is that it's precisely Gu Kan's tendency to go to emotional extremes that's led him to develop such a strong attachment to Chan Ping'an. So he was being perfectly earnest when he told Chan Ping'an that he wouldn't retaliate, even if Chan Ping'an were to beat him to death. Those are some extremely precious emotions, and Chan Ping'an is aware of that, which is why this situation is all the more painful to him. Back when Lu Xianyang was about to pass on from this world, he hadn't displayed any resentment or blame toward Chan Ping'an. Instead, all he had expressed to Chan Ping'an was an unwillingness to accept his fate and die, and that memory would only serve to further compound his pain. Such is human nature. Everyone starts off as a frog at the bottom of a well, but some will eventually leave the well. However, when they turned back to tell those still at the bottom of the well about the principles that they had gleaned, their words would only fall upon deaf ears because deep down, those still at the bottom of the well won't accept those principles. In their minds, those high and mighty principles don't apply to the wretched individuals still rolling around in the mud at the bottom of the well, and heeding those principles would be a surefire path to an early grave. Fortunately, Qian Ping'an has already come to realize this, and that's why what he was saying to Gu Ken on the way to his manor, and what he just said at the table after having that bowl of rice were worlds apart. It's just a pity that Gu Ken was still too young back on Clay Vase Alley, so he didn't get to see what Qian Ping'an had to suffer through back when he was his age, nor did he witness all of the trials and tribulations that Qian Ping'an had to face over the course of his long journey. All he sees is Qian Ping'an with a sword on his back, bestowing that jade pendant upon the little catfish. He sees a mature Qian Ping'an who knows far more about the world than he does, but he doesn't know how Qian Ping'an was able to get to this point, nor is he necessarily willing to find out. In contrast, Qian Ping'an is willing to ponder things on a deeper level, and that's why this mess will only become messier and messier. If the two of them could swap places, with Qian Ping'an embarking on that long journey with Gu Kan's personality, while Gu Kan stayed on Cyan Gorge Island with Qian Ping'an's personality, then we wouldn't be dealing with such an irresolvable conundrum. Then again, if that were the case, then we wouldn't even be sitting here right now. In the end, Cui Chan turned to Cui Dongshan as he concluded, "Overall, your teacher has already done exceptionally well. I didn't think that the eyes of an old dog like yourself would be capable of beholding beauty," Cui Dongshan harumphed coldly. Cui Chan wasn't bothered by the insult and he smiled as he said, "There are two areas in which Qian Ping'an has done splendidly well on this trip to Cyan Gorge Island, and they're two concepts that you've spoken to me about in the past, namely severance and delineation. On the Luchuan, he brought out their only remaining common ground and set it down right in between the two of them. Otherwise, he would have already lost back on the Luchuan, and you and I would have been able to leave this city. He did that to test that assassin, both to better understand the hearts of the people in Bamboo Scroll Lake, as well as to tell Gu Kan that the assassin should be killed no matter where they were, and that he was willing to listen to Gu Kan's principles. If Qian Ping'an were to elevate his own principles to too great an extent, referring to them as reflections of the highest standard of morality in order to try and influence Gu Kan, then there's a good chance that Gu Kan will feel as if Qian Ping'an is no longer the same person that he once was, thereby driving a permanent wedge between them. After disembarking from the Luchuan, he gave the jade pendant that once belonged to that sage from the Confucian temple to Lu Jimao, knowing that Lu Jimao would be able to recognize the jade pendant, in which case he wouldn't dare to meddle with Qian Ping'an's affairs. At the table, he intentionally removed Gu Kan's mother from the conversation, limiting her ability to interfere with him and influence Gu Kan otherwise. What was already a chaotic mess would have only become more chaotic with her inclusion. Even so, will that really do anything? Is this still not an irresolvable conundrum? Cui Dongshan asked with a cold smile. Cui Chan nodded in response. As long as Qian Ping'an is unable to overcome the hurdle in his heart, no matter what he does from here, he'll only sink deeper and deeper into the hole. Even if Gu Kan is willing to apologize, what good will that do him? There are so many innocent people who lost their lives under unjust circumstances, and they'll cling to him like vengeful spirits, pounding on the door to his heart day and night, dragging down on his conscience like dead weights. In reality, there are 4 hurdles facing Qian Ping'an, the first of which is whether Gu Kan is willing to admit fault. The second hurdle is for Qian Ping'an to sort through all of the principles that he's read from books, heard from others, and thought of himself to find the truly important foundational principles among them. The third hurdle is that after finding these foundational principles, he could come to realize that he's actually been wrong all along, and the difficulty there will be whether he can remain true to himself after that. The fourth hurdle is deciding what to do after overcoming the first 3 hurdles. The most difficult of those hurdles are the third and fourth ones, and the third hurdle is one that Qian Ping'an will be destined to be unable to overcome. What about the fourth hurdle? Cui Dongshan asked. The difficulty in the fourth hurdle lies in the fact that it encompasses countless hurdles, Cui Chan replied in a mysterious manner, while Cui Dongshan gave a cold sneer in response. Cui Chan remained unbothered as he continued. If Qian Ping'an really does have what it takes to reach the fourth hurdle, then once we've seen him overcome this hurdle, we'll be able to see why there are so many foolish and immoral people in the world, as well as why everyone clearly knows so many principles that would better their lives, but there are still many people who are living worse than dogs. Those are the people that become the likes of Zhu Lu, the empress of our great Li Empire, and Du Mao. Why can't we all be Qi Jingchun or Aoyang? Unfortunately, Chen Ping'an won't be able to make it to this point because if he does, then he will have already lost. When that time comes and you still want to stay, then you can remain here and watch your teacher slowly wither away, both mentally and physically. As for myself, I will definitely already have been long gone by then. Why are you in such a hurry to leave? Are you about to die soon? Cui Dongshan jeered. Cui Chan burst into laughter as he pointed a finger at Cui Dongshan and said, "You have to learn to be more calm and placid like your teacher. Only by controlling your temper can you have control over yourself." He then turned his gaze back to the scroll on the ground as he continued, "I still don't think Gu Kim will even admit to any wrongdoing. What do you think?" Cui Dongshan closed his eyes again and offered no response. It wasn't that he was pretending to be dead. Rather, it felt more like he was resigning himself to his fate and was awaiting death. As the saying goes, there are no never-ending banquets. In some cases, the banquet remains, but the people have already left, and all of the seats are vacant. However, when it comes to the banquet that is Cyan Gorge Island, even though the people still remain, the banquet is already as good as over. The hearts of those in attendance are no longer connected, so it may as well just be a happenstance gathering of a bunch of strangers, Cui Chan murmured to himself. Chen Ping'an was led by Gu Kan to an opulent room, rather than an independent courtyard. It was right next to one of the rooms that Gu Kan would occasionally stay in. Chen Ping'an told Gu Kan to go and have a heart-to-heart conversation with his mother, but after leaving Chen Ping'an's room, Gu Kan decided not to go find his mother. Instead, he went on a stroll to take his mind off things, and it didn't take long before the little catfish began to trail along behind him. It communicated to Gu Kan using its mind's lake that upon seeing the jade tablet, Lu Jimao initially dismissed it as a counterfeit, but upon verifying its authenticity, he seemed to have been scared witless. Gu Kan smiled as he replied, "I told you that Chen Ping'an was definitely going to become a very remarkable person, yet you didn't believe me. How about now? Do you believe me now?" The little catfish heaved a faint sigh. At the moment, Gu Kan was really tempted to go and kill that golden courtier woman who had already been locked up in that water cage, but following his conversation with Chen Ping'an, he knew that killing that luminous Vermilion Empire assassin would have been a completely pointless endeavor. Chen Ping'an wasn't bothered by these assassins or all of those enemy cultivators. Instead, he was enraged by the injustice of all of the innocent girls who had lost their lives in the mouth of the little eel, as well as all of the so-called ants that had been wiped out across all of the islands, the people who were just like what he and Gu Kan had been back on Clay Vase Alley. "I have some things that I want to say to Chen Ping'an, but would it be appropriate to go and find him now?" Gu Kan suddenly asked. Chen Ping'an paused here momentarily as he strayed from the jade-paved path and made his way toward the bank of the lake, with Gu Kan following along close behind. Once there, Chen Ping'an crouched down and drew a circle onto the ground with the branch in his hand. "I'm going to tell you a principle that I thought of. It's still incomplete, and I don't know if it's right or wrong. Back on the Parasol Leaf continent, I met someone who became a good friend of mine, and he once mentioned in passing the distinction between noble scholars, virtuous scholars, and sages of the Confucian academies. This was an idea that I developed based on what I heard from him at the time. Why haven't I met any good friends in Bamboo Scroll Lake?" Gu Kan grumbled to himself. At the same time, he was feeling very envious as he wanted to be Chen Ping'an's only friend under the heavens. Chen Ping'an smiled as he wrote down the words virtuous scholar in the little circle that he had drawn, then continued, "There are rules in the Confucian Academy for how one is to become a virtuous scholar. A virtuous scholar must be very well read, and the foundational teachings that they develop must be suitable for use in a national context, forming the basis of governing strategies that can benefit an entire nation." He then drew a slightly larger circle and wrote the words noble scholar in it as he continued, "If the teachings proposed by a virtuous scholar are applicable on a continent-wide context, then they would earn themselves the title of noble scholar." Finally, he drew an even larger circle, within which he wrote the word sage and continued, "If a noble scholar's teachings grow over time to encompass the entire world under the heavens, then they'll become a sage." Chen Ping'an pointed at the 3 circles as he said, Take a look at these 3 circles. They tell me that even the Confucian academies are promoting personal standpoints. All virtuous scholars, noble scholars, and sages each have their own standpoints. In that case, what about officials, generals, vagrant cultivators, and the average layman? Why is it for us that it's wrong only to consider personal standpoints without taking into account right and wrong? Firstly, it's alright to have a personal standpoint, and it's very difficult not to have one. But that doesn't mean that one can focus solely on their own standpoint and disregard everything else, Chen Ping'an explained. That is one way of being true to oneself, but it's a very selfish and narrow-minded way. When it comes to the teachings and ways of life that people subscribe to, there are common foundational principles that are universal, whether that be between virtuous scholars, noble scholars and sages, or emperors, generals, and commoners. That's why in the official Confucian temple on the Middle-earth divine continent, the wiser and more well-learned an individual is, the more their writings will be presented near the bottom, serving as foundational pieces for the writings above them. Apparently, even so with the passing of time, some of the golden writings left behind by the wisest sages have begun to lose their luster. Gu Qian was only becoming more and more perplexed by the second, and a slight smile appeared on Chen Ping'an's face upon seeing this. I pondered all of this for a very long time last night, and I wanted to speak my thoughts to you, but in reality, it's more so for myself to hear. After sweeping his gaze over his surroundings, Chen Ping'an continued, Cyan Gorge Island is a circle, the rules inside of which were established by Lu Jimao. On a smaller scale, the place where you and your mother are staying is also a circle, and many of the rules of your household were established by you and your mother. On a larger scale, Bamboo Scroll Lake is a circle as well, and its rules are the traditions established at the price of the lives of countless vagrant cultivators throughout history. On an even larger scale, the central region of the eastern treasured Vile continent, that's home to Bamboo Scroll Lake, is a circle presided over by Lakeview Academy. On the flip side, the individual principles that each of us subscribe to form the smallest circles under the heavens, and they apply only to ourselves. It's once been said that one should strive to hold themselves to higher standards of morality, and I believe that means to abide by the rules of the largest circle possible. Chen Ping'an rested the end of the branch in his and on the ground, and he seemed to have been talking to himself as he murmured, There's something that I'm very afraid of, and it's that the principles that can help me endure less hardship and overcome obstacles will take root and become principles that govern my actions for the rest of my life. The flow of time is ever present, but you and I will rarely ever see it. The passage of time is an irreversible process, and like I said earlier, even the golden writings left behind by many wise sages will be robbed of their luster by the passage of time. As time passes, the principles of yesterday may lose their purpose and meaning. Gu Qian suddenly cocked his head to the side and asked, You're saying all of this because you want me to realize that I'm wrong, right? Chen Ping'an offered no response as he continued on his one-sided monologue. However, I feel like some things that are at the very bottom, the lowest of the low, like some of the things that have fallen onto the feces-laden path that is our clay vase alley, those things will never change. They are exactly as they have been 10,000 years ago, and they will remain that way even 10,000 years later. For example, even when I was about to starve to death, I never considered stealing or robbing. I'll never forget for the rest of my days how your mother opened her doors to me and gave me that bowl of rice. There was also that time when a Tonghulu salesman had tried to give me a Tonghulu for free, yet I held back the urge to accept it. Do you know what I was thinking to myself at the time as I was running away? Gu Qian was happy to talk about anything as long as it didn't concern an admission of fault from him, and he asked in a curious manner, What were you thinking? Chen Ping'an cast his gaze into the distance as he said, I was thinking to myself that it would be wrong for me to accept the Tonghulu as at the time, I still had several copper coins in my possession, so I wasn't on the verge of starving to death. That's why I couldn't accept the Tonghulu. I was worried that after I've had something so good, I would find my already impoverished life to be even more pitiful, that it would make my already difficult life even more difficult to endure. At the time it was a blessing for me just to be able to fill my belly halfway with plain rice, and I was worried that something like that would no longer satisfy me once I've had a taste of that Tonghulu. What would I do then? Go back every single day to ask for more? Even if he were willing to spare me a Tonghulu every time I asked, what would I do if his stall were to suddenly disappear one day? But you know what? At the time, even all of these principles couldn't outweigh the temptation of that Tonghulu. At the time, I really wanted to turn around and tell that Tonghulu salesman that I had changed my mind, and that I was going to take the Tonghulu after all. Do you know what it was that kept me from turning around back then? Chun Ping'an didn't wait for an answer from Gu Qin before continuing. I told myself that there was no need to salivate over a Tonghulu, that one day my father was going to come back, and I would be able to have as many Tonghulus as I wanted. He promised to bring me a Tonghulu next time he returned home. Hence, when I snuck back there to discover that the stall was missing, I was a little sad, not because I would have no further opportunities to receive free Tonghulus, but because I was concerned that my father wouldn't be able to buy one for me once he returned home. Gu Qin really wanted to tug on Chun Ping'an's sleeve to console him, but he didn't dare to do that. Everyone has to hold on to some hope in life. Isn't that right? Chun Ping'an murmured to himself. Did you think that I didn't know that there was no chance my father would ever return? I did know, but I still wanted to hope. Remember how back when we used to talk together at night, you'd always ask me why I wasn't afraid of ghosts? It wasn't that I never feared ghosts to begin with. Instead, it's because one day it suddenly occurred to me that if ghosts really did exist, then I would be able to see my parents, and I became a lot braver after that. At the same time, I became a little worried. My parents were such good people, so surely they would turn into good and kind-hearted ghosts. In that case, would they be bullied and oppressed by the malicious ghosts, to the point that they wouldn't be able to come and see me? After his voice trailed off, Chun Ping'an was silent for a while, following which he turned around and patted Gu Qin on the head as he said, "You can go now. I want to take a stroll by myself." Gu Qin nodded in response before departing, and once he was far away, he suddenly turned back around as a strange thought arose in his mind. It seems like Chun Ping'an isn't as angry and sad as he was yesterday, but he seems more disappointed, but not in me. That night, Gu Qin noticed that the lamp in Chun Ping'an's room was still lit, so he went to knock on his door. Chun Ping'an made his way around his desk to the table in the main hall as he asked, "What are you doing still up? You're still up as well, are you not?" Gu Qin countered with a smile. Gu Qin noticed that the table was laden with sheets of paper that were riddled with text, but there wasn't even a single ball of scrunched-up paper in the wastebasket, so he asked, "Are you practicing your calligraphy?" "No, I was just writing down some random stuff that came to mind," Chun Ping'an replied with a shake of his head. "Over the years, I've always been looking and listening, but I haven't been doing enough thinking." "Did you manage to think of anything?" Gu Qin asked. Chun Ping'an considered the question for a moment, then replied, "I was pondering a quote just now, and it goes, 'The freedom of a powerful individual draws its boundary at the freedom of a weak individual.' I'm hardly a powerful individual, and I'm still only a kid right now," Gu Qin scoffed with a roll of his eyes. "Age does have something to do with this, but it's not an important factor," Chun Ping'an said. "I've encountered many very formidable adversaries in the past, such as the Empress of the Great Li Empire, an old flood dragon who is even more powerful than the little eel is right now, and even an Ascension tier cultivator. It would be unfair to purely condemn them as bad people. In fact, in the eyes of many they are great people, perhaps even saints. However, at the very least they don't understand this principle. This is one of my most precious principles, and I'm only telling it to you because you're Gu Qin. As for whether you're going to listen to it or not, that's up to you. However, it's exactly because you're Gu Qin that I want you to truly take this to heart. Despite your tender age, you have the desire to protect your mother, and that makes you powerful. There are many people who are far older than you who can't compare with you in this regard." Gu Qin rested his chin on the table as he smiled and said, "My mother was always telling me about everything you did for your mother back when she was alive, and she would always compare me to you, saying that I'm an ungrateful little scoundrel who doesn't appreciate her. Let's not talk about right and wrong for now. Consider this. If everyone under the heavens had the same mindset as you do now, what do you think will become of the world?" Chun Ping'an asked. Gu Qin shook his head as he replied, "I never consider such things." Chun Ping'an nodded in response. Those were Gu Qin's true thoughts. Gu Qin was worried that Chun Ping'an would get mad at him, so he hurriedly added, "I'm just telling the truth and saying whatever comes to mind. You told me to do that." Chun Ping'an changed the subject as he continued, "If everyone in the world were you, then our hometown would have been absent of Mr. Qi. Our clay vase alley wouldn't have had our neighbor Grandpa Lu. Nor would there have been Grandma Lu, or Uncle Zhao, who often helped your mother harvest her crops. I don't think that's a big deal. Even if those people didn't exist, my mother and I would have still survived. Perhaps we would have had to endure a few more beatings, and my mother would have had to endure a few more face scratchings, but sooner or later, I would have beaten all of them to death one by one. As for those who displayed kindness to us, I'll repay them in kind. They can have whatever they want from me. Whether that be immortal currency, beautiful women, or lavish houses. If everyone were you, then I would have been absent from Clay Vase Alley as well. That's unacceptable. Gukan immediately snapped with a stern glare. A faint smile appeared on Chan Pingin's face. After a brief silence, Chan Pingin said, Gukan, I know that you've been telling me the truth this entire time, and that's why I'm willing to sit here and speak to you. Now, I'm going to ask you one final question, and I hope that you can continue to be truthful to me. Do you like killing people? Gukan was hesitant for a moment, but the corners of his lips then slowly began to curl upward, and before long, a wide and earnest smile had appeared on his face as he declared in a categorical manner, I do. His smile remained radiant, but tears were beginning to flow down his face as he said, I don't want to lie to you, Chan Pingin. Chan Pingin also smiled as he reached out to wipe the tears from Gukan's face and said, It's all right. Honestly, I feel like I'm the one who's wrong. It's impossible for my principles to discern right from wrong, but in any case I'm still Chan Pingin while you're still Gukan. You're not mad at me? Gukan asked in a concerned manner. No, Chan Pingin replied with a shake of his head. But you're clearly still angry, Gukan murmured in an unconvinced manner. I'll do my best not to be angry at anyone, Chan Pingin said. Following Gukan's departure, Chan Pingin rose to his feet, and his intention was to make his way to his desk, but he suddenly stopped in his tracks. He turned back around, intending to return to the table to sit and have a rest, but he didn't feel like doing that either, so he remained rooted to the spot. His hands were clasped together in their opposite sleeves, and he was slightly hunched over in contemplation. The old monk in that small monastery in the southern Garden Nation had said that one must first lay down their blade if they wished to attain salvation. However, Gukan didn't feel like he had done anything wrong, so he was continuing to hold tightly onto that blade of slaughter in his heart, and he had no intention of relinquishing it at all. Hence, what he had said to Pei Qian about the matters of the past becoming irrelevant yesterday, and the matters of the future beginning from today would have simply fallen upon deaf ears when it came to Gukan. It was easy to eradicate a den of bandits in the real world, but eradicating a den of bandits lurking in one's heart was far more difficult. Chan Pingin felt like the bandits in Gukan's heart had infiltrated his own heart and taken root there, proving impossible to kill or evict. Gukan was someone that he absolutely couldn't abandon, so this hurdle in his heart was proving impossible for him to overcome. The old sword immortal by the name of Chan Qingdu had said to Chan Pingin that he was civilized and reasonable wherever he wanted just so he could cast aside all civility and reason for those few occasions in his life. However, Chan Pingin knew that even if the old sword immortal gave up on civility and preaching reason and principles to others, he still held those principles dear to his heart. It was just that even for someone like him, there were times when his principles fell upon deaf ears, and on those occasions, he was forced to turn to his sword. Chan Pingin was feeling a little lost. He had suddenly come to realize that he had already espoused all of the principles that he knew, as well as perhaps even all of the principles that he intended to espouse to others in the future. Inside the tall building in Pond Water City, Cui Dongshan murmured to himself, even the most enlightening of words will have no effect on someone who does not wish for enlightenment. Cui Chan smiled as he said, people like Gukan are what's so brilliant about the great Tao. Compared with an ordinary so-called good person, people like him are more able to stand out. Cui Dongshan turned to glower intently at Cui Chan as he interrogated. Have you sent anyone to protect Gukan in secret and facilitate his murderous ways? If I had sent someone to successfully assassinate Gukan's mother, then intercepted Chan Pingin on this southbound journey and allowed Wan Xiu to unintentionally wound Gukan, then wouldn't that have nailed the coffin even more tightly shut? Cui Chan countered. Do you think I need to make such arrangements? No, doing that would completely spoil the fun and leave Chan Pingin with even fewer options to choose from. It seems like that would place him into an even more desperate situation, but in reality, that would only make it easier for him to turn to extremes. He would either kill Gukan, or put an end to his own life. In that case, the only two possible outcomes would conclude with one of them dead, and there would be no meaning in that. Perhaps there would be some meaning, but it wouldn't be sufficiently significant. You would be reluctant to accept such an outcome, and I would also feel like I cheated to secure victory. A dejected look appeared on Cui Dongshan's face, following which he suddenly erupted into a furious fit and demanded, "What exactly has Chen Ping'an done wrong?" An exasperated smile appeared on Cui Chan's face upon hearing this. "You're being immature. Tell me," Cui Dongshan roared. Cui Chan smiled as he cocked his head to the side and placed a hand beside his own ear, as if he were waiting for an answer. "Paramount Sage, Etiquette Sage, you two are the wisest and most learned individuals out there. So how about you answer that question for us?" Cui Dongshan immediately fell silent. Cui Chan smiled as he continued. "The final outcome has already been largely decided. All I want to know now is which legalist saying you enclosed in that brocade pouch." "It wasn't a legalist saying," Cui Dongshan replied with a dejected shake of his head. "In that case, it most likely isn't a Buddhist saying either," Cui Chan mused. "It's not a principle from any of the 3 teachings and 100 schools of thought," Cui Dongshan murmured in an absent-minded manner, and Cui Chan's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. Chen Ping'an pulled the brocade pouch out of his sleeve with a trembling hand. Pei Qian had given it to him prior to their departure from Red Candle Town, and she had told him to open it and inspect its contents in a moment when he was at the height of his rage. Chen Ping'an opened the brocade pouch and pulled out the slip of paper inside, inscribed upon which was the sentence, "Chen Ping'an, please don't be disappointed in this world." Chen Ping'an placed the slip of paper back into the pouch, following which he slipped the pouch back up his sleeve, then turned to look at the night sky outside through the window as he murmured, "I'm just very disappointed in myself." Inside the building, Cui Chan burst into triumphant laughter, while Cui Dongshan was plunged into complete despair. It had already been a very, very long time since Cui Chan had laughed so joyously. Cui Dongshan was just about to stand up and make his way out of the self-imposed prison that was the golden lightning field when Cui Chan's eyes suddenly narrowed slightly. Inside the scroll, Chen Ping'an picked up his sword nurturing gourd, then finished all of the wine inside in one go. He then pulled out golden sweet wine, which draped itself over his body on its own. After that, he pulled out a cleansing talisman and plastered it onto one of the pillars in his room. From there he closed his eyes and embarked on an internal trip, sending his consciousness to the entrance of the manor where the golden scholarly core resided. The doors slowly opened, and the tiny golden figure with the sword and book on its back emerged from within the manor, then said something to Chen Ping'an that even Mao Xiaodong was unable to fully grasp the meaning of. "The ability to learn from and make up for our mistakes is a great virtue." That was the deep concern that Chen Ping'an had held toward Gu Ken in his heart. It was an implication to himself more than anyone else. After making a mistake, one had to own up to it. Just because Gu Ken was dear to his heart didn't mean that he could simply look past Gu Ken's mistakes and justify them. Instead, he had to do everything in his power to make up for those mistakes. But so many people had lost their lives, and Gu Ken wasn't willing to admit fault, so how was he supposed to make amends? With right and wrong staring him directly in the face, Chen Ping'an was unable to turn a blind eye and lie to himself. Just because it was something that many people were saying and doing didn't mean that it was right. Chen Ping'an extended a parting bow toward the golden figure. The golden figure had countless things that it wanted to say to Chen Ping'an, but in the end, it only heaved a faint sigh as it returned Chen Ping'an's parting bow. A loud thump rang out like a death knell across Chen Ping'an's internal small world. The golden scholarly core was shattered, and the golden figure's long sword and book, which had become rusty and devoid of luster of late, faded away along with its own body. A bloody odor began to spread through the room, and Chen Ping'an staggered to the ground, sitting down with his legs crossed. He then struggled to his feet and pushed all of the papers on his desk aside as he began writing 3 letters. "I've lost," Cui Dongshan conceded with a cold expression. A long silence ensued. Cui Dongshan was a little perplexed, and he turned to discover Cui Chan seated with his back ramrod straight, as if he were about to face a major ordeal. The next day, a very strange person suddenly appeared on Cyan Gorge Island. The first thing that they did was send out 3 secret letters by flying sword. As for the contents of the letters and who they had been sent to, no one dared to pry as they had been sent by Gu Kan's esteemed guest. The 3 letters had been sent to Wei Bo of the Dragon Spring Prefecture, Zhong Kuei of the Parasol Leaf Continent, and Fan Jun Mao of Old Dragon City. He was asking them if there were any shortcuts to quickly master the immortal technique of gathering souls, as well as how a person could become a Yin entity or go into the cycle of reincarnation after death. Additionally, he also wanted to know if there were any lost, ancient secret techniques that could allow one to summon a deceased individual, so that they could be spoken to by someone from the world of the living. After that, he asked for a small room at the entrance of a mountain on the island, within which was a table laden with paper, a brush, an inkstone, and simple abacus. It was a young man who appeared rather frail, with a sickly pale complexion, but he kept himself clean and meticulously groomed, so he was clearly still looking after himself. He had requested the files of all of the cultivators and servants on Cyan Gorge Island from Tian Hujuan, and at the moment, he appeared much like an accountant.